Early the next morning, Jessica contacted the Ministry of Magic again, pressing them to implement all forms of compensation immediately, especially the financial and in-kind payments. Percy, the Minister for Magic's secretary, arrived at the hospital with Thompson, the ministry's finance official, both carrying briefcases full of documents. Miss Jessica, on behalf of Mr. Fudge and everyone at the Ministry of Magic, I offer our sincere apologies again for the injustice you and your son suffered, Percy said, bowing with Thompson beside her. Jessica did not hate the ministry enough to fly into a rage. After 11 years in Azkaban, with barely a glimpse of daylight, her temper had been worn down. She accepted the apology with a calm nod. Thank you, Miss Percy. I appreciate the ministry's effort to correct this miscarriage of justice. Percy breathed a quiet sigh of relief and opened her briefcase. You've seen the compensation plan. This is a more detailed version. If anything is unsatisfactory, please tell us, she said. She handed over the documents. Jessica read carefully and then looked up at Percy. In principle, we agree. When will these measures be implemented? Percy glanced at Thompson, then answered, We will process the return of the Travis family's sealed manor and lands as quickly as we can. However, those properties have been without supervision and scattered over the years, some divided by the ministry, some appropriated by the Travis family's former allies among the pure-blood families. Please be patient with the restitution process. Rolf stepped forward with a gentle smile, taking some of the strain from the room. What we're most concerned about are the financial compensation and the London property the ministry promised, he said. Please sit and explain the items in the agreement in detail. Percy understood immediately. She had already relaxed when she saw how composed Jessica was and was pleased by Rolf's respectful tone. Given Rolf's special circumstances, the ministry is offering 5 times the standard compensation, she said, motioning for an official to bring the relevant papers. Due to legal restrictions, most of the payment will be transferred into Ms. Jessica's name. We know that Galleons cannot undo the harm done by the ministry in Azkaban, Percy added carefully. This is only our expression of apology. She made a small request as she spoke. Ms. Jessica, would you accept payment in installments? For example, 40,000 galleons a month for 10 months. Don't worry, the ministry will pay interest at the highest market rate for that month, Percy added quickly, glancing at them anxiously. The other items on the list were easy to negotiate. The large lump sum payment was the headache for the finance department. Even the ministry would find paying out 400,000 galleons in one go difficult. They hoped Jessica and Rolf would accept installments, and they were prepared to make concessions on other items. Jessica looked to Rolf for guidance. She wasn't comfortable with financial negotiation. After a moment, she nodded and encouraged him to reply. Installments are fine, Rolf said, not wanting to haggle over interest. But we hope the other compensations can be put in place as soon as possible. Miss Percy, could you tell us more about the London property the ministry is offering? That item seems unclear. The London property clause was the most open-ended in the agreement. What they could get depended on negotiations. Percy had prepared for that. She produced a small enchanted map from her case and spread it on the table. With a tap of her wand, a miniature 3-dimensional map of London rose up between them. As her wand passed over the map, properties the ministry could offer glowed softly. We have a 200-year-old top-floor apartment in Grosvenor Square, Percy began. A detached villa on the Thames, ideal for riverside living. A high-end apartment near St. James's Park, close to Buckingham Palace, in a wealthy Muggle neighborhood with Muggle-repelling charms installed. Whitehall Villa on the Thames with a garden and a private feel. A Victorian terraced house in South Kensington for those who prefer classical architecture. There are also some small estates in the suburbs, some even with a modest Quidditch pitch and unique top-floor duplexes. Jessica marveled at the ministry's resources. Rolf simply stared at the map with a swell of emotion. After so many bleak years, the thought of a warm home of his own moved him. Rolf, you choose, Jessica said softly. What's the price range? Rolf asked Percy. 500,000 to 800,000 pounds, Percy replied, slightly increasing the ministry's original upper limit. Since the properties are in Muggle districts, they're priced in pounds. Thompson blinked at the figure, £100,000 higher than their original bottom line. But given Percy's authority and the settled compensation issue, he suppressed his doubts. Rolf's finger hovered over a 3-story modern villa on the Thames, floor-to-ceiling windows with sweeping river views, a spacious garden planted with roses and wisteria, and a small wooden jetty for a boat. It was secluded and peaceful, the kind of place he and his mother could finally call home. "This one?" Rolf asked. Percy's face clouded. "That villa is a lovely property," she said carefully, "but its muggle price is between £1 million and £1.5 million, well above our usual budget. It suits you very well, but it really exceeds what we planned. Perhaps consider another property?" Jessica looked at the villa and then at the map. She, too, liked it. "What if we use the galleons from the compensation to cover the difference?" she asked. Thompson jumped up before Jessica had finished, enthusiasm written all over him. The official exchange rate between galleons and pounds was often quoted as 1 to 5, but wizards rarely converted their money on that basis. Since Muggle currencies had long been fiat, unbacked by gold, their value differed in wizarding eyes. Thompson explained quickly. A galleon weighs 8 grams, about 95% goblin-forged metal, and roughly 5% recovered gold. With Muggle gold prices around £700 to £800 an ounce, and the goblins' minting costs taken into account, the practical exchange rate between galleons and pounds tended to be closer to 1 to 10. "At that rate," he said, eyes bright, "the villa would cost roughly 100,000 to 150,000 galleons. Given the prime location, fixtures, and magical fittings, a figure between 150,000 and 180,000 galleons would be more realistic." Percy gave Thompson a quick nudge. He grinned sheepishly, then sat down and smiled apologetically. Chapter 22, Thompson's Report. "Of course you can pay in galleons," Percy whispered into Rogge's ear, "but think carefully. The compensation will put a lot of pressure on the Ministry of Magic." Rogge glanced at Jessica. She nodded, encouraging him to decide for himself. "Thank you, sister. We'll cover the difference in galleons," he said. "How about 60,000? Rogge offered. Percy didn't object, but Thompson, hovering nearby, leapt in. "Impossible! If this villa goes on the market, it could fetch 200,000 galleons. Even after compensation, you should at least add another 100,000. "All right, 100,000 then." Rogge tossed an unsigned supplemental agreement onto the table, legally meaningless, but dramatic. "Miss Percy," Thompson pleaded, sweat beading on his forehead, "the appraisal falls under your Department of Finance." Percy shrugged and rose to pour herself a cup of coffee. "Mr. Rogge, 60,000 really isn't enough. It's far too little," Thompson said, forcing a flattering smile. If this installment compensation collapsed, he could already picture the director's face and maybe a transfer to the Arctic to guard a forest. "I understand your concerns, Mr. Thompson," Rogge replied in a tone of sudden sympathy. "Why not readjust the valuation method for the property? Reevaluate the location, the decor, the depreciation, things like that. As a financial expert, it shouldn't be difficult. It's just a reevaluation, right?" The suggestion lit a spark in Thompson's eyes. He lived and breathed the ministry's valuation algorithms. A slight tweak to a few parameters, and a property could be made to conform to any expectation. I think the property does need reevaluating," he said, suddenly animated. He produced a clean sheet of parchment and, in a bold, practiced hand, began to draft the report. "I'm going to the restroom," Percy said with a small smile, congratulating Mr. Thompson silently on his newfound zeal. Riverside Villa, River Thames, TW13, Property Appraisal Report. Thompson consulted the enchanted map and wrote, "The property is a 3-story, modern minimalist-style villa located on the outskirts of London. Although it possesses certain living facilities and transport connections, its distance from the city center leaves surrounding services scarce and transportation somewhat inconvenient. The property shows potential for appreciation. However, its proximity to a major river renders the surrounding environment humid, subjects it to frequent noise pollution, and raises maintenance costs." He read aloud as he wrote, making the appraisal sound measured, objective, and professionally damning. No one could dispute that the villa wasn't as central as they might like, and no one could deny the occasional blare of a Thames horn. Mr. Thompson, given the expanding Muggle population in Greater London, we should list pollution in the Thames as a key factor, Rogge suggested. Absolutely, Thompson added briskly. Those Muggles have no idea how to protect the environment. He added the point, pleased with the first section. Then, wand in hand, he slipped a quick inspection charm into the villa to probe its internal condition. The property occupies a large plot, including a substantial garden and a private jetty. The floors in the living and dining rooms are severely cracked, exposing structural timbers and requiring full replacement. Estimated cost, 10,000 galleons. Rogge nodded vigorously. The house had been cleaved. Of course, the floors were in terrible shape. Thompson inflated the repair estimate, doubling it to 20,000 pounds and converting it into the equivalent in galleons at the official exchange rate, strictly by the book, he reminded himself. As a finance officer, he must adhere to official rates. He continued, the master bedroom ceiling, the second-floor guest room, and the study on the third floor all showed severe water damage and required complete renovation. The walls and roof were overrun with exotic ivy, staghorn ferns, and other vine-like growths, rapid spreading, difficult to eradicate. The garden is choked with weeds and must be fully cleared. Considering the adverse effects of some magical plants and the possible appearance of magical fauna, additional medical costs resulting from incidents during clearing should be considered. Estimated total, 5,000 galleons. The magical fixtures throughout the house are dilapidated, carpets are ruined, and many wards need reapplication. By the time Thompson reached the 5th page, his pen had turned relentless. The cumulative deductions added up to an extra 40,000 galleons, well beyond what Rogge had hoped for. For the sake of our friendship, why not let these 5,000 go toward procurement of Muggle equipment and electrification conversions? Rogge suggested, pushing a cup of coffee toward Thompson with a genial smile. Friendship? Thompson repeated, bemused. Yes, 5,000 galleons of friendship, Rogge said lightly. Jessica, propped on her sickbed, watched with a complicated expression. She knew this friendship was effectively a bribe, and at Rogge's age it felt wrong, but she was relieved too. The Travis family's heir seemed shrewd in a way that might revive them. Perhaps it's the Azkaban experience, she thought wryly, blaming herself. Matters like this ought to have been handled by her, the mother. Thompson, however, was already lost to the possibilities. 5,000 galleons felt like a lottery win to him. His monthly salary in the Department of Finance was a mere 50 galleons. 5,000 would buy him 9 years of comfort. I will designate these funds as special budgets, he declared, eyes shining. Procurement of equipment and books from the Muggle world, necessary to prevent young witches and wizards from being misled by pure-blood ideology. He straightened, suddenly full of bureaucratic righteousness. Cars and small boats should be included. Rogge and Thompson nodded to each other, and, unembarrassed, Thompson dove back into the property, applying his imagination to the paperwork. We should redesign the basements, convert them into potion labs, he proposed, as if the suggestion were perfectly normal. The partnership settled into place, smug efficiency married to opportunistic creativity. Half an hour later, Thompson had bound the report neatly and set it before Miss Percy for her review. The document had done its job. A 3-story Thameside villa, originally worth between 1.5 and 1.8 million pounds on the open market, now stood on paper at 60% less, only 600,000 pounds, after taking official exchange rates and his flavorful deductions into account. If Rogge hadn't stopped him, Thompson admitted, he could probably have pushed the valuation even lower. In a certain light, the ministry might owe Rogge money. Percy flipped through the report with a raised eyebrow. It seems you two had a productive conversation, she said, marveling at Thompson's audacity. An ordinarily honest man, once unleashed, could move mountains. The report is professional, she concluded, and closed it. The appraisal would be reviewed by the Department of Finance. This fell squarely within their remit. As the minister's secretary, she was above the details of valuation methodologies. She simply made sure the paperwork moved. It was Mr. Rogge's prompting that made me consider the property's shortcomings, location, structure, decor, and so on, Thompson said, with a bow of mock humility. I firmly believe this report fully and accurately reflects the true state and value of the property. His eyes gleamed. For the first time, he understood how colleagues of the same rank could live comfortably while he had scrimped and worked late into so many nights. Maybe the Department of Finance had always had unwritten rules, rules he had finally learned to play. Chapter 23, End of July. Percy smiled to herself. Maybe someone would come to verify the report's authenticity, but she knew, deep down, that the department's work was finished on paper alone. An actual investigation? Heh, Percy sneered inwardly. As long as the report was thorough and meticulous, why bother with anything else? At least Thompson's property appraisal had been professional. Everything listed was real. Minor discrepancies were easily explained away. Big Sister Percy, I want to convert part of the galleon compensation into Muggle money, Rogge said abruptly. Rogge? Jessica looked startled and moved to stop him. Muggle money is practically worthless to a witch or wizard. Calling it waste paper is being generous. Thompson sided with Jessica, adding his own dissuasions. The two of them stared at Rogge like he'd lost his mind. Rogge felt a little awkward, but he couldn't explain what he really meant. The Soviet Union was on the verge of collapse, and failing to get Muggle currency now would be missing the big chance of 1991. Who said Muggle money was useless, he thought. You could buy land and real estate with it, tangible assets. Mom, trust me just this once, Rogge begged, tugging Jessica's sleeve and adopting his most spoiled, pleading look. Just this once. I promise I won't regret it. Jessica relented. Just once. No more. Half is impossible. At most 100,000. Long live Mom, Rogge exclaimed, thoroughly embarrassed but unable not to plant a loud kiss on her cheek. If only he weren't still underage and financially dependent on his mother. Big Sister Percy, if I convert that compensation into Muggle currency, when will it arrive? He asked. Rogge, I still don't recommend it, Percy began, interpreting his request as a sign of gratitude and offering a kindly warning. Don't worry, I won't regret it, Rogge insisted. Since you're set on it, fine, but the Muggle money, like British pounds, can only arrive this afternoon, and it won't fetch the 110 underground rate. I can get you 1.8. No problem, Rogge did the math in his head. The potential loss was recoverable. Everyone in the Sunny Ward left satisfied. The installment plan was set, and a portion of the compensation would be converted into useless Muggle money. That would placate both the Department of Finance and the Minister's office. By any Newt-style evaluation, their handling of the case deserved an O for outstanding. Thompson was grinning from ear to ear. He had not only won Rogge's friendship, but also learned some unspoken rules. He was convinced that when Miss Percy needed the Department of Finance's backing in future, she'd call him first. Rogge, how about we get Miss Percy a necklace in a few days? Jessica suggested. Of course, Mom. Rogge agreed, already forgetting to say thank you to Percy. From early July to late July, from Azkaban to the Wizengamot, from signing the compensation agreement to handing over property, the Ministry of Magic spent nearly a month processing the whole affair, top to bottom. Jessica and Rogge, as direct victims, had their reputations and identities fully restored and received substantial compensation. The ministry also offered other tangible and intangible benefits. Jessica, though not a ministry employee, was given a nominal post and continued to receive a comfortable monthly stipend. Others involved received rewards as well. Rita's gains were especially dramatic. The Daily Prophet reporter's public image was transformed from accused fabricator to a courageous journalist exposing corruption. To reward her prominent role, the ministry made an exception and awarded her a second-class Order of Merlin, a career leap she had never expected. Still, Rita's green quill didn't stop embellishing the truth. Readers would have to judge which parts of her reports were factual and which were literary flourish. Even in the wizarding world, reliable, unembellished journalism remained rare. Paul Knopf, the Azkaban administrator who had leaked the matter to the press, felt the full displeasure of Minister Cornelius Fudge. The minister's anger showed in his demeanor, and it seemed in a loss of 20 pounds. The ministry likes to reward upright staff. On the day the ministry's resolution took effect, Paul received a promotion notice. Under the guise of promotion, he was finally allowed to leave the Azkaban post he loathed and sent to Wales to guard a section of the flu network. With the 200 galleons Rita had slipped him as a retainer, he lived a reasonably comfortable life there. With Percy and Thompson pushing things through, all the compensation paperwork was rapidly stamped and processed. A ministry owl, laden with a huge packet of documents, flopped through the window in a puff of tired feathers. The stack was heavier than a cauldron. "Thank you," Rogge said, offering the owl a portion of a special treat. Premium oak-aged birdseed, mixed with enchanted herbs, moon neon nectar to boost its magic, fish oil infused with magical nutrients, and powdered fire snake eggshell for calcium. There were also exotic flavors like magic bird snail and dragonbeard pepper to tempt even the choosiest avian palate. Ever since Diana had tasted it, she had refused ordinary food. Even Yumi tried to fly using her magic just to get a bite of Diana's food, only to be pecked off the perch. "Quick, regain your strength," Rogge said, and the messenger owl happily gobbled the food. "Rogge, maybe you should get another owl," Jessica said. Her own health had improved. She could walk again. "Diana is too beautiful. If poachers see her, they'll try to capture her." "Yeah, maybe I need an owl for daily deliveries, too." Rogge stroked Diana and thought about the magic within magical creatures. If he could discover or invent spells suited to them, they could defend themselves and even aid wizards in a pinch. "From now on, Diana will rely on you to protect her," he told Jessica. "Don't worry." Jessica produced her wand, black walnut with a dragon heartstring core. Diana heard the summons and came to land, steadying herself on Jessica's shoulder. Across the Thames, in a well-appointed villa, a neatly dressed middle-aged man sat upright on a leather sofa. He wore a Henry Poole suit, a crisp Charles Tyrwhitt shirt, polished morning shoes, and his hair was immaculately combed. He radiated the calm confidence of the financial elite. "Rogge, this is my cousin Andrew," Thompson said, lifting a cup of black tea. "He's a squib, but very bright and very successful in the Muggle financial world." Chapter 24, Mom is Not at Home Today. He's a doctor of finance from Cambridge. Oh, right, Rogge, you might not know this. Cambridge's status in the Muggle world is, how should I put it, a bit like Hogwarts' standing in the magical world. "Thanks, Thompson." Rogge nodded, walked over, and enthusiastically extended his hand. "I've heard of Cambridge. Together with Oxford, they're the two great universities of Britain." "Of course," Thompson agreed heartily. Hearing a pure-blood wizard praise his alma mater made Andrew swell with pride. He grinned and relaxed into the conversation. "Mr. Rogge, back in university, I led my school team to first place in the National Stock Investment Competition. After graduating, I got offers from major investment banks. I designed a lot of high-risk operational strategies, securing ultra-high leverage for clients, shorting markets across countries with derivatives. Cough. Thompson cut in. "We are wizards here. Your achievements in the Muggle world don't mean much." "Mr. Rogge, are you thinking of investing in the financial city? How much capital are you working with?" Andrew reacted immediately, turning his professional instincts on the little wizard in front of him. Rogge opened an undetectable extension trunk and casually displayed neatly stacked bundles of British notes. "I currently have £800,000 on hand. To be honest, it's a little, please don't laugh." 800,000. Andrew's eyelids flickered. The average practitioner in the financial city earns around £25,000 a year. 800,000 meant 30-some years of total salary. The private bank he worked for had a minimum investment threshold of 500,000. This was already a sizable personal fortune. He composed himself into a professional tone. "That's enough for an initial operation, but to break into the financial city, capital alone isn't enough. Connections and market savvy are even more important. Mr. Andrew, perhaps I wasn't clear. I need you to arrange sufficient leverage and secure large credit lines from major banks using your contacts." "Rest assured, that's not a problem. How much leverage are you thinking? 10 times? Andrew thumped his chest, confident that amount was trivial. "No. 50 times? Andrew hedged. "A bit tough, but doable." Rogge shook his head. Andrew felt his heart drop. 100? Andrew's eyes widened. 100 times is just doubling the leverage. If you combine the principal and this real estate as collateral, can you borrow enough and then short Soviet-related financial products? Andrew froze. The Soviet Union existed here, in the story Andrew knew, rife with political turmoil, but once a superpower that could have marched to the English Channel in weeks. Who shorted an entire superpower? Was Rogge naive about muggles? His lips trembled. He couldn't form an answer. I don't need you monitoring world events every hour, Rogge said coolly. I need you to short everything tied to the Soviet Union. Short government bonds, short the ruble, short stock indices and commodity futures, oil, natural gas. And then at the right moment, we close the positions. It's simple. Rogge watched Andrew's stunned expression and added quietly, "Where's your appetite, Mr. Andrew?" I... Andrew made a weak, incoherent noise. His last short had ended with him liquidated by the counterparty. He'd almost gone bankrupt. To attempt it again, and against the Soviet Union, felt suicidal. Maybe he'd jump off a financial building, or maybe the KGB would come for him. His imagination ran wild. Rogge rose and poured him a cup of Hagrid's mead. The financial city is full of talent and hard workers, but few can seize rare chance. I have the chance. I just lack someone to execute it. Andrew sipped the whiskey. His hands stopped shaking. His lips steadied. He thought he was already teetering on the edge. Falling was inevitable, so he might as well jump all in. He set his glass down and spoke with new resolve. "Mr. Rogge, do you need a professional Muggle asset manager? I can give you a complete financial plan." "Good question," Rogge said with interest. "That depends on whether your plan convinces me." Andrew quickly organized his thoughts and outlined a detailed investment blueprint. "First, I need the property valuation. The paper valuation is only £600,000. 600,000? Andrew inwardly scoffed at whoever appraised it. In his view, it was worth at least 1.5 million, not counting valuable fixtures. "That's negotiable. Use whatever appraisal system you prefer." "Understood." Andrew continued, "In the first round, we can leverage the funds about 8 times and the real estate 5 times. Conservatively, that gives us around £7 million available." "Very good. That gives us plenty of working capital." Rogge leaned in, intrigued. "That's the multiplier effect. We'll take that to major banks like Barclays and HSBC and open high-leverage accounts." Andrew's confidence grew. "I have contacts. Barclays' CEO is an old classmate of mine." Hearing those names, a light went on in Rogge's eyes. He'd found his gateway into the Muggle financial world and the right partner. 7 million times 10 leverage becomes 70 million. "That's already substantial," Thompson said, distractedly letting tea spill down his sleeve. But Rogge was not satisfied. "I want to push further." "Further?" Andrew took a breath. "No problem. Do you know about betting contracts?" "Betting? A zero-sum game. Riskier than short selling, but more leverage." Andrew paused, then smiled thinly. 70 million taken into the over-the-counter betting market can be leveraged another 20 times. That's 1.4 billion. The number trembled on his tongue. With that much capital, a loss would be catastrophic. If Rogge weren't a wizard, if he weren't pure blood, if Thompson hadn't vouched for him, Andrew would never dare. 1.4 billion. Thompson's eyes widened. He didn't even notice the tea stain spreading. That was roughly 140 million galleons, enough to buy the whole British magical community twice over. "Rogge, are you sure?" Thompson asked, the question Andrew had been too afraid to voice. "Confident? I wouldn't say 80%. I'd say 100. Rogge answered with absolute certainty. "Because of prophecy." "Prophecy? Yes. This month, the Soviet Union will descend into chaos. By Christmas, it will be gone. Trust in magic. Destiny never errs." Thompson took a long drag on his cigarette and exhaled slowly. "Rogge, count me in." Chapter 25, The Hope of Growing Magic. "The Ministry of Magic has 700,000 galleons. I can borrow them. As long as we return them on time, no one will know," Rogge said. "With the ministry backing us, we'll have enough margin to avoid forced liquidation," Andrew replied, nodding. They both turned to Thompson. "Will you take part?" "Aye," Thompson hesitated. "I can risk a few thousand galleons. It depends on whether you need me. If you're willing, I'll handle the ministry and the currency exchange. As for the final profit, how about a 10% cut?" Rogge offered. "No problem." Thompson agreed. Rogge raised his glass to toast Andrew. "I'll give you a 3-point share." 3 points? Andrew did the math in his head. 3%. Using the magical world's exchange rate and the leverage plan Rogge outlined, the numbers flashed through his mind. The first round of leverage, 8 times cash and 5 times real estate, would bring the operable funds to $58.7 million. The second round was tenfold, and the over-the-counter bet could be 20 times, pushing the betting capital to around $11.74 billion. Keeping a 30% margin left roughly $8.218 billion in play. If Rogge's prediction held, even with a conservative 1.5x return, they'd clear an enormous sum. It could rescue his finances and make him a powerhouse in Financial City. Still, Andrew was cautious. Mr. Rogge, 3% feels low. This level of leverage is unheard of. If you weren't a wizard, I wouldn't agree. The operational risk is huge. How about 5%? Andrew asked. I can accept 5%, but I have a better idea, Rogge said with a smile. A sliding commission. For final profits up to $10 billion, you get 2%. For anything above that, your rate jumps to 30%. 30%? Seriously? Andrew's eyes lit up. His appetite for risk flared. I'm a wizard. Mr. Rogge, don't worry. I'll make the biggest profit possible, Andrew promised. Mr. Andrew, I have no doubt. Rogge raised his glass. To our success, their 3 glasses clinked. Remember to hire bodyguards, or even have a wizard station there, Rogge added, growing serious. London's fairly safe, but with that kind of money, it's better to be prepared. He packed the cash into ordinary boxes and handed them to Andrew. From today on, you're a magnate in Financial City. Manage it well. Andrew nodded, his eyes gleaming with excitement and greed. That afternoon, Jessica returned with the house elf Bubble. Bubble had short, silver-white hair and large, sparkling green eyes. Compared to Flashy and Dobby, Bubble was cuter and livelier, and most importantly, very good at French cooking. Rogge no longer had to live on fries and fish and chips. Jessica set Bubble to cleaning the house and preparing dinner, unaware that, in a very real sense, the home had already been mortgaged. In the villa's underground laboratory, Rogge was brewing a potion. A brilliant blue light shimmered from the silver cauldron. As he waved his wand, the mixture exploded just as it began to crystallize. The cauldron rocked, and a loud bang sent colorful sparks scattering. Rogge emerged from the blast with his face blackened, looking like a soot-streaked mouse. Bubble bustled in with a towel and, without fuss, tidied the workbench and soothed the cauldron. Jessica, resting in the garden, shook her head. This was the 40th explosion. She held a stack of letters, mostly from French relatives, a few from former classmates, and one Muggle letter among them that caught her eye. Another bill for Rogge's Muggle toys? She muttered, remembering how obsessed he was with Muggle trinkets. She opened it and froze. She stormed into the basement, furious. Rogge, did you mortgage our house? She demanded, grabbing his ear and hauling him out of the lab. Mom, gently, gently, Rogge said, eyes flicking to the letter. He'd been so absorbed in potion experiments, he'd forgotten the Muggle Bank would send back the mortgage paperwork. Explain yourself. Jessica threw the letter on the table. So you sold our house for a pile of worthless paper? She snapped. Not sold, temporarily mortgaged. We still have the manor, Rogge stammered. Manor? Jessica laughed harshly and glanced at Bubble. Ask Bubble what the Travis ancestral home looks like now. It's practically a ruin, stolen from thieves, plundered by robbers. Apart from some talking portraits, it's just weeds and rats. Get the house back from the Muggles immediately, she ordered. Mom, it was mortgaged only 2 days ago, Rogge admitted, meeting her angry stare. I'll contact Andrew right now and get it back tomorrow. Your pocket money is canceled, Jessica declared, poking his head. Go take a bath. Rogge looked at his reflection, hair messy, face still smudged with soot. He hadn't left the lab in a week. He showered, wrapped a robe around himself, and called to Bubble. Go prepare the materials. Little Master, the materials we bought last time are used up. Should Bubble go to Diagon Alley to buy more? Bubble asked. How much money do we have left? Rogge asked. 200 galleons, Little Master. Enough for 10 sets of potion ingredients, Bubble replied, patting the emptying coin bag. The fat pouch of gold his master had once given was now pitifully deflated. Rogge sighed and picked up his notebook. The old potion book he'd bought in the second-hand shop had been a treasure trove. Amid impractical recipes, the giant potion with terrible side effects, a sprint elixir for a brief boost in magic, and a devil's nettle juice that increased magical capacity but got wizards hopelessly addicted, he'd finally found 2 formulas that looked promising. The first was called Phoenix Blood. As the name suggested, it required adding a small amount of phoenix blood to the cauldron to enhance a wizard's magic. A spectacular idea, but useless in practice. Phoenixes were rare, and the only well-known phoenix lived in Dumbledore's office. Rogge had no intention of sneaking into the headmaster's study to syringe the bird. Dumbledore's phoenix would likely respond with a mouthful of flame. The other potion, Blue Moonlight, looked much more feasible. All its ingredients were available on the market, its effects were excellent, and it promised to enhance both spirit and physique in a compound way. Rogge's tired eyes brightened. This might be the breakthrough he needed. Chapter 26. Press the accelerator into the gearbox. The core ingredients for the potion were dragon blood to strengthen the body, dragon head flower leaves to boost mental resilience, moonlight dew to attune to the moon's magic, and starlight bearberry to increase the body's magic reserves. Auxiliary components included moonstone powder, blue rose petals, luminous insect powder, licorice root, and the like. A full set cost 20 galleons. Expensive was an understatement. The recipe was fiendishly complicated and required absolute precision. The slightest error would spoil the whole batch. So far, Rogge had already burned through 800 galleons on trials, experimenting around the clock. All he had to show for it was a thick stack of failure notes. He opened his notebook and recorded Experiment 40. He chewed his pen and stared at the ceiling, thinking. In the earliest tests, Jessica could still help guide him, but once Rogge began working directly with Blue Moonlight, her advice became moot. She simply couldn't intervene. He had to rely on the cauldron's simulation functions, repeating the ritual and learning from every failed attempt. He advanced slowly. Rogge knew this advanced potion was beyond his current skill. Direct contact would be reckless. Still, the 2.3 magic ceiling felt like a tight curse around him. He had to find a way through it. After every failure, he meticulously documented the procedure, recorded parameters, and noted the liquid's changes. Then he cross-checked his notes against the formula to identify the flaw and avoid it next time. To save time, he bivouacked in the underground lab. When he was hungry, he sent Bubble for food. When he was tired, he slept on the small bed nearby. If Jessica hadn't come down to check on him every day, she probably would have worried herself sick. Money was one thing. The accumulation of defeat was another. Rogge's will, sharpened by his experiences with Dementors, kept him from collapsing under that pressure. "Rogge, you need a proper rest," Jessica said, entering with a steaming cup of milk. She reached for his notebook. "Mom, I'm so close. Just a little longer." Rogge clung to her, trying his best to look pitiable. No. Jessica pushed him gently away and insisted he drink the milk and go to bed. He climbed into the soft bed under her watchful eye, closed his eyes, and promised himself he would sneak back down the moment she left. Sleep overtook him faster than he expected. Jessica tucked him in and settled Yumi, who had leapt onto the bed. "Little Master, the materials are here," Bubble announced cheerfully, holding up a bag. Bubble's apparition skills were embarrassingly useful. "You'll bring it to him in the morning," Jessica said, tapping Bubble's head and taking the bag. Rogge slept straight through from 6 in the evening until 6 the next evening, 24 hours. He woke up refreshed, ate a quick dinner, and then stared imploringly at Jessica. "Not tonight. Go to bed now. I'll give it to you in the morning," she said firmly, conscious she had to keep his schedule in check. Rogge sulked but obeyed. Bubble bowed his head. He couldn't help his little master steal from his mistress. At dawn, Rogge snatched the experiment notebook and rushed back to the lab. Jessica watched his retreating figure with a helpless smile, hoping that once he used the last of the materials, he would finally rest. She believed in his talent, but she also knew that without systematic training, he couldn't perfect such an advanced potion by trial and error alone. Rogge touched the laboratory table with a faint tremor of unfamiliarity after 2 days away. Sunlight sliced through the window and dust motes drifted in the beam. "Clean as new," he muttered, flicking his old wand. The room shimmered into a dust-free state. "Bubble, bring the ingredients." Failure, failure, another failure. He couldn't afford more. His mother had made it clear she wouldn't hand over another galleon for pocket money. Rogge closed his notebook, forced his focus, and began grinding moonstone into powder. Moonstone filtered impurities from dragon blood. In the Western magical world, dragons were more like enormous, violent lizards with wings, not the benevolent Eastern dragons. Their blood was potent but dangerous. Even adult wizards rarely handled it raw. Rogge had learned through repeated trials that the optimal particle size for moonstone was between 800 and 1,000 mesh. Too coarse, and it wouldn't purify the dragon blood. Too fine, and the powder itself would contaminate the blood. He ground the moonstone until it was impossibly fine. In a long test tube, the Hungarian horntail's blood shimmered. He added 20 grams of moonstone powder. The blood immediately clouded. As the moonstone settled, the blood above cleared, becoming a deep, perfect emerald, crystal and pure. After layers of refinement, this hard-won dragon blood was finally ready for the potion. "Rogge, that muggle Andrew is here." Jessica called from the doorway. She had seen him working with the materials and knocked to announce the visitor. "Andrew?" Rogge secured the dragon blood and went out to meet him, curious why his asset manager was here at an odd hour. "Mom, did he say what this is about?" Rogge asked before Andrew could speak. "He mentioned something about Moscow in the Muggle paper," Jessica replied. "Moscow? What's today's date?" "August 16th. There's still half a month before school starts." "Why?" "There are 3 days." Rogge thought for a moment, then made a decision. He stepped into the garden where Andrew paced, visibly excited. "Rogge, I got my cousin Thompson to send me newspapers from the Soviet Union." Andrew practically shoved a stack of papers at him. "This is today's Izvestia. Look, Yakovlev says there's a coup brewing in the CPSU. He's claiming the Minister of Propaganda is involved. Since June, the Soviet Union hasn't been paying interest or principal on foreign debt for almost 3 months. With the unrest they're about to face, you were right," Andrew said, triumphant. "Quiet." Rogge pulled Andrew aside to keep Jessica from overhearing. "Most of Financial City hasn't seen this yet, but the markets are already twitchy." "Are they collapsing?" Andrew asked. "Not yet." Rogge frowned. It was only August 16th. The storm was just gathering. Andrew shook his head at the question. "I came to ask what to do next," Andrew whispered. "If the market recovers, we'll need to add margin." Rogge ran through the baffling sequence of Soviet moves in August in his head, how they seemed to stomp the accelerator as things went downhill. Dates flickered through his memory. 8/19 coup, 8/25 resignation. If the market turns up before the end of the month, don't hesitate. Go all in, Rogge said. He wasn't interested in a small win. He wanted a feast. If you run out of liquidity, find Thompson. And besides what he promised, you can borrow my galleons from the Ministry of Magic. Rogge, aren't wizard galleons kept at Gringotts? Andrew squinted at him. I'm not letting you use some wizard identity to trick me. You don't need to know why. The Ministry of Magic owes my family hundreds of thousands of galleons, Rogge replied coolly. Hundreds of thousands. Andrew's eyebrows shot up. Remember what I said. Don't be afraid. Don't let me down, Rogge said, patting his friend's arm before sending him off. He turned and found Jessica standing in the living room doorway. He forced a grin and said stiffly, Mom, the weather's really nice today. Chapter 27, Blue Moonlight. Rogge, you'd better not make us homeless, Jessica said as she came back into the living room and, for the first time ever, turned on the television to listen to the Muggle BBC News. A few days ago, she had taken the agreement to a Muggle bank. They had spoken a lot of financial jargon, and by the end, she hadn't understood a word. What she did understand was that the house couldn't be recovered for the time being. Her son already owed hundreds of millions in Muggle currency. Hundreds of millions. The number had stunned her. She'd never seen anything like it. She put on a brave face, went about tidying the house and taking care of her son, but resolved that no matter what happened this time, Rogge would never touch a single galleon in the house again. It was too dangerous, and his allowance would be halved from now on. Rogge didn't know any of this. He had run back to the laboratory and taken out the bottle containing the dragon blood flower leaves. Dragon blood flower leaves had to be picked within 3 days either side of the full moon and cut into even pieces with a silver knife. The starlight bearberry and other materials were ground or sliced as required, then placed in a stainless steel vessel or dark glass. Rogge had carefully processed most of the ingredients and had the crucial moonlight dew left. Moonlight dew, collected on a full moon night, balanced the terrible power of dragon blood and let the little wizard sense the moon's magic. It was the most expensive ingredient in the whole formula and had a strict rule. Once opened, you had only 3 seconds. After that, the dew, priced by the gram, would become worthless water. Rogge went over the rest of his prepared materials again, then stared at the vial of moonlight dew and hesitated. He'd always suspected that some crucial variable in making blue moonlight had been overlooked, and that it probably had something to do with timing. He checked his watch and started a simulation precisely at 6 p.m. The simulation ran. At 18:01, the simulated potion exploded just before crystallization. By color, it had reached the ideal silver blue for crystallization, so the problem wasn't the formula up to that point. Everything before cooling had worked. The failure always happened in the final cooling and crystallization. Rogge wrote that down, underlined and circled, cooling and crystallization. The simulation function on his panel was invaluable. Its results and real experiments rarely differed more than marginally, usually only because of human error. Since the simulation showed failure, he didn't have to waste his last batch of materials. He read the original formula again to be sure nothing had been missed. He'd spent nearly 1,000 galleons. There had to be something there. He examined his past experiment records and compared them. There were no major issues in the recent runs. The only difference is the time, he murmured. He drew a timeline in his notebook, marked hourly intervals, estimated completion rates for each experiment, and sketched a bar chart. The simulation's failure point was at the top, his experimental results underneath. The potion's silver was brightest at 9 p.m. and worst at midnight. Sometimes it even stopped reacting as soon as it grew dark blue. A pattern emerged. The completion rate was higher at night. He redid the stats excluding daytime trials and saw a steadily rising curve. Positive correlation, he whispered, grinning. So that's your secret. He looked at the window. Twilight lingered, but the moon was already up. The better the moon phase, the higher the completion rate. No wonder it was called blue moonlight. He cursed the author of the formula under his breath for hiding such a key detail, then reminded himself that not every witch or wizard published their methods plainly. Many tucked crucial hints into a single, inconspicuous word. Brewing potions required talent, will, galleons, and a reliable teacher. He checked the calendar. August 8th was the first quarter, and the 16th the full moon. Today happened to be the Cheeksy Festival. Great, he thought wryly, as if he needed a reason to be lonely. Rogge took a deep breath, cleared his mind of the household worries, and mentally ran through the process. The moon outside was full and unobstructed. He began the real brewing. All ingredients except the glowworm powder, moonlight dew, and starlight bearberry went into a gleaming silver cauldron. He stirred a glass rod counterclockwise 7 times with his wand, heated the mixture to a boil, then reduced the heat and simmered for 5 minutes until the liquid turned dark blue. Wingardium Leviosa, he murmured, lifting the cauldron off the fire. He stirred clockwise 3 times, added the glowworm powder, and then stirred vigorously counterclockwise 10 times. He set the cauldron back on low heat and watched it until blue-silver steam began to rise. He counted the steams while his eyes flicked to the full moon. 6, 5, 1. Now, he shouted. He opened the moonlight dew and immediately dropped the starlight bearberry fragments into it. The dew's penetrability was terrifying. It pulled the starlight out of the bearberry in less than a breath. The liquid in the glass bottle shifted from silver white to a dazzling silver blue, tiny stars suspended inside. Rogge didn't pause to admire it. He poured every drop of the moonlight dew into the cauldron, not a single bead wasted. Perfect timing. He shut off the fire and flipped the hourglass on his bench to time the cooling. 3 minutes later, the cauldron glowed with a mysterious silver-blue light. Rogge watched, tense and elated, as the contents began to crystallize. Under his unwavering gaze, the silver-blue potion fully crystallized, then transformed into a viscous, smooth fluid. "It's done!" he cried, leaping to his feet and letting the joy wash over him. He carefully poured the blue moonlight into a test tube and screwed the cap tight. His panel updated itself with a new potion entry. Rogge Travis Magic Power, 0.6, 2.3, Mental Power, 12. Talents, Dark affinity, strong will, night vision. Skills, wandless casting, advanced potion making. Potions, blue moonlight. Spells, Lumos 3 3650, Expecto Patronum LV10, Wingardium Leviosa LV4 700, Scourgify LV4 1700, Transfiguration Charm LV1 01. This is it. I finally succeeded. He held the bottle up, and the moonlight shining through it filled the room with silver blue. Starting from nothing, all his long days of work had borne fruit. Not only had he produced the priceless blue moonlight, it was the first milestone in his potion-making journey. He couldn't wait to test its effects and feel the boost it would bring. But there was still one last step to perfect the blue moonlight. Chapter 28. Moderate Side Effects. Bubble. Rogge Travis opened the door and called the little elf's name. "Little master, you finally succeeded. Bubble is so happy for you." Bubble's eyes sparkled as he hugged the vial. Jessica heard the excitement and came downstairs. She stared at the shimmering blue moonlight, overwhelmed with relief and pride for her son. "Yes, Mom, I finally did it." Rogge grinned and hugged Jessica. She had been terrified of another potion explosion. "There's one last step. Bubble, take that shaker to the balcony." Rogge pointed at the small medical device beside him. All that remained was to let the potion shake for 6 hours. According to the recipe, blue moonlight could be used at this point, but absorption would be low, less than 50% of its potency. If it could be kept shaking and brewed for 6 hours, the viscous liquid would revert to the proper silver-blue potion. "Okay, little master, Bubble will prepare it." Bubble fetched the shaker and the test tube rack, then followed Rogge to the balcony. Rogge carefully removed the vial. Under the bright moonlight, the silver-blue potion gleamed even more brilliantly. They secured the vial to the shaker. The steady swirling would help the magic fuse. Now they only had to wait. There was also the matter of Yumi, the mischief maker. As Yumi grew, the little elf magic inside it became more abundant. It spent its time running, jumping, and flying, and while it hadn't caused any disasters, it constantly got into small trouble, equal parts lovable and irritating. "Bubble, keep a close eye on Yumi and don't let it mess with the potion." "Don't worry, little master. Bubble will protect the blue moonlight with his life." Bubble patted his chest. "That's not necessary. If you died, who would run errands for me?" Rogge teased. "Little master is truly too good." Bubble beamed. As a house elf, being valued by his master was the most precious thing. "All right, go rest. I'll watch Yumi." Jessica gently steered Rogge away from the balcony and flopped onto the sofa, staring at the shaker. She could have used a spell to replace the muggle device and shook the potion automatically, but she didn't. The torment of Azkaban had nearly halted her son's magical development. Blue moonlight could only boost his magic temporarily and would not heal his body. Jessica hoped that having Rogge use muggle tools would open other paths and help him progress on the wizarding road. She waved her wand and sent a repelling charm to the balcony. Yumi, about to leap toward the shaker, was bounced back. It paced and scratched at the barrier, but couldn't get through. Jessica smiled and fetched a cold drink from the refrigerator. It had been another tiring week, but the results were worth it. Rogge took a shower and meant to rest only 6 hours before retrieving the potion. He overslept. When he finally woke, he jumped up in a panic. "Ah, what time is it?" "Calm down, my dear boy. Look at your results." Jessica shook the test tube. The silver-blue potion shimmered even in daylight. "Thank you, Mom. Let me see." Rogge hurriedly dressed and took the vial. "My magic is finally saved." He buried his face in Jessica's shoulder, speechless for a long moment. "Son, although blue moonlight's side effects are minor, you still need to be careful," Jessica warned. "I know." Rogge nodded and began bottling the potion. For adult wizards, blue moonlight could be taken straight away. For little wizards, a sudden surge of power was dangerous, so the treatment had to be stretched over 30 days. After each dose, the user would feel sleepy and hungry. That was normal. Sleepiness increased mental recovery and enhanced magic, while food provided nutrition and strengthened the body. Compared to the side effects of some other potions, baldness or full-body hair growth, this was practically negligible. Rogge uncorked a bottle and let a drop of the silver-blue liquid touch his tongue. It tasted cool and sweet, like spring water. Then a warm current rushed from his throat to his brain. He felt light, as if his whole body were floating. The room melted and twisted, walls and furniture blurred into kaleidoscopic shapes. Specks of light darted before his eyes until a beam shot into his mind and opened a door to another world. Millions of colors flashed. He seemed to leap into a realm of iridescent waves where strange singing creatures danced around him. A deep drowsiness spread from his brain down through his spine to every nerve and cell. His skin felt as if caressed by moonlight, soft as silk. This child, he's too impatient. Jessica held her son as he slept. He had only been awake a few minutes before the potion's effects took hold. Rogge didn't wake again until evening, rubbing his eyes and stretching with a huge yawn. That nap had been blissfully comfortable. Yumi slept soundly on the quilt beside him and grumbled when Rogge moved, protesting the loss of a warm cushion. Rogge didn't have time to soothe the creature. He checked his readings. Magic, 2.8, 2.8. Mental power, 13. Talents, dark affinity, strong will, night vision. Not bad, Rogge said. It went from 2.3 to 2.8, and mental power increased by 1 point. He beamed. To boost magic just by sleeping, this is wonderful. Calculated over 30 days, blue moonlight could theoretically raise his magic by 15 points. Accounting for the body developing resistance, a conservative estimate was still around 10 points. His stomach growled in loud protest. The hunger side effect was worse than the recipe suggested. Bubble had already prepared a spread and carried it to the table. First came a rich onion cream soup whose aroma whetted Rogge's appetite. Next was a whole roasted chicken with crispy skin and tender meat. Ablaze with hunger, he grabbed a drumstick in each hand and began to gnaw. Mind your manners. Jessica scolded as she approached, frowning. Mom, I'm practically starving, Rogge protested. Jessica took his hand, wiped it with a handkerchief, and set a knife and fork in front of him. Chapter 29, Andrew's Trouble. Etiquette and speed aren't mutually exclusive, Jessica said, sitting across from Rogge. Her knife and fork moved with surprising swiftness, slicing a portion of roast into neat, bite-sized pieces in the blink of an eye. It looked effortless and refined. Rogge watched, dumbfounded. Mom, how did you? He stammered. He'd never expected his mother to be so skilled. When I was little, we went to France for the holidays. Jessica replied with a small smile. I was always starving. Eventually I learned to eat properly, fast and polite. Ah, relatives in France? Rogge asked. Something like that. Jessica let it drop and asked Bubble to bring out more side dishes and dessert. The onion soup warmed Rogge through. The roasted chicken and beef revived him faster than he dared hope, restoring strength to his tired limbs. By the time he had a slice of apple pie and the last spoonful of cream pudding, he felt nearly whole again. Burp. You full? Jessica peered at the cleared plates, half incredulous. The meal had been enough for 3 adults. How did it all fit in her son? 80%, Rogge admitted, sipping apple juice. A pleasant warmth spread through his stomach. I'm worried about you at Hogwarts, Jessica said. Missing class from sleeping is one thing, but not eating enough could affect your development. Won't they feed me at school? He asked. Usually, yes. But Rogge, do you think a normal little wizard could eat this much? Jessica shook her head. Below the Great Hall is the house elf kitchen, with an entrance opposite Hufflepuff. If you get hungry in the middle of the night, you can go there. I really hope you get sorted into Hufflepuff like your mother. We'll see what the sorting hat decides, Jessica added, waiting for him to ask what a sorting hat was. Rogge, however, had already run off to play with Diana. The next days eased into a gentle routine. When he was awake, he'd preview his textbooks, and when he was hungry, he'd eat. On August 27th, the phone call from the financial city came in. Mr. Rogge, please come save me. I'm being blocked in. Andrew's voice came through hushed, heavy knocking audible in the background. Tell me where you are. 3201D, St. Mary Axe, Financial Tower, Andrew whispered. Rogge, hurry. There was no time for small talk. Rogge hung up and called, Bubble, prepare the car. He could have had Bubble apparat them to the financial city, but that risked alerting the Ministry of Magic and could expose Thompson's creative borrowing of galleons. Rogge preferred to solve this the Muggle way. What's wrong? Jessica asked, noticing his brow knit as she handed him his coat. Andrew's being targeted. Wizards? Muggles. I don't know what kind. Take your wand. Don't worry, Mom. Rogue nodded and shrugged on the suit they'd had made in Naples. Outside, a Maybach 500 SEL idled V8 4-speed 0-100 km per hour in 6.9 seconds. To the financial tower, he ordered. Yes, little master. Please sit tight. Bubble hovered at the wheel, using magic to manipulate the steering and pedals. Start simulation. A translucent panel blinked with options. You arrive at the financial tower, and the muggles arrest Andrew and drive you out. You wave your wand and cast Obliviate on them. The Ministry detects magic. Senior aurors arrive and take you to the Ministry for questioning. Downing Street objects to wizard interference in the Muggle financial market. The Ministry opens an investigation. Insufficient magic. Simulation stopped. What? Rogue stared at the panel. He still had 3.3 magic points left. Why had it stopped? He rubbed his temples, unease prickling at the edges of his mind. The first 2 simulations cost a total of 1 point, he muttered. If the 5th branch needs 4 points, damn it. He glowered at the buttons. The simulation system charged magic exponentially. Each extra branch of possibility siphoned more mana until it exploded like an exponent. Even if he'd brought Medivh, he couldn't explore every possible future. The price for nudging fate, he realized, was staggering. Each step into the unknown demanded an unpredictable toll. The car eased to a stop in front of the financial tower. The doorman hurried to open the glass doors when he saw the expensive car, then paused, surprised to see the passenger, an 11-year-old boy in a tailored suit. He glanced at Rogue, then at his confident, composed face. The doorman's question about whose child he was stuck in his throat. Rogue noticed the look. He tapped his pocket, then muttered, "Bubble, call Thompson." If this ended in profit, he wasn't going to sit out of the action. "Take me to the 32nd floor," he told Bubble. "Child, my workstation is down here," the doorman said, half amused. Rogue fished in his pockets, thinking to throw a handful of galleons to the doorman. Of course, he had nothing in them. Whoever kept coins in their suit pockets? He shrugged and stepped into the elevator. He stood on his tiptoes, just short of reaching the button, when a woman in black stockings crouched and asked, smiling, "Going to your mommy and daddy's floor, sweetheart?" 32nd, Rogue said. The woman pressed the button for him. The doors slid open onto a scene of chaos. Dozens of people crowded the far end of the corridor. A group of burly men pounded on an office door, the flashes of firearms at their waists visible for a moment. "Andrew, open up!" "Never, you bloodsuckers. My transaction is legal. To hell with Rothschild and Morgan, losers." Andrew's voice burst through the door, echoing down the hallway. Inside, he paced, and 4 hired bodyguards braced themselves against the heavy door to keep the crowd from forcing it. "If it's legal, why won't you talk?" someone outside called. "Talk," another answered. "HMRC, CIT, MI5, and now NCA and Interpol. Do you think I'm an idiot?" "You just want to seize the money," Andrew roared. "You'll never get it." "Boss, how come you didn't mention Interpol?" one of the bodyguards muttered, barely audible. Working finance apparently came with the kind of risk that required bulletproof resolve. "None of your business. Hold the door." "We can't hold it much longer," the bald bodyguard panted, sweat beading at his temples. "If you take him away, you won't see a penny of your salaries. But if the boss shows up, your pay and bonuses will double." Andrew shouted from inside. The 4 officers outside exchanged glances and braced themselves. "Excuse me, could you please make way?" Rogge said calmly. He'd decided that revealing his wizard identity would be a bad idea. He needed another way in. He looked no older than a child, but he spoke with the composure of someone used to being obeyed. "Go play somewhere else, little one," Sophia, wearing an agency badge, waved him off. "I'm here for Andrew." "For Andrew? Are you Andrew's son?" Aaliyah asked, stepping forward as if to take him by force. "No, I'm Andrew's boss." Rogge slapped the woman's hand away and announced his claim with stiff solemnity. "You're Andrew's boss?" Miss Sophia laughed. "Fine, little boss. Could you please go somewhere else? This is adult business." "I didn't want to get involved either, but Andrew's in trouble." Rogge shrugged in a way that made Sophia pause. He added quietly, "If you won't open the door, let me try. Maybe if I call out, he'll let us in." The adults, a little abashed, moved aside and watched him. Rogge stepped up to the door and called, "Andrew, open up." "Never." "Mr. Rogge, please, get away." Andrew shoved a bodyguard and stumbled to the door. The sight of him made the guards' disappointment obvious. They had expected a heavyweight from Financial City, not a kid who looked barely out of toddling age. "Mr. Rogge, you're finally here!" Andrew almost dropped to his knees, clutching Rogge's hand as if mooring himself to someone solid. Rogge patted his shoulder like a patient guardian. The onlookers murmured among themselves, bewildered by the strange tableau. "Rogge, what's so urgent you had me come?" Thompson appeared in the aisle, having slipped in behind Rogge. The Muggle official glanced between the child and Andrew, trying to place him. "Is this child your guardian?" Sophia asked, still unsure. No. Thompson shook his head vehemently. "Thompson is my partner. Since you're here for Andrew, come in and talk. One leader goes in, everyone else steps outside." Rogge's voice brooked no argument. "Allow me to introduce myself properly," he continued. "Rogge Travis. Andrew is our family's asset manager. Thompson is an employee of a large financial institution. Rogge, I'm Sophia, National Crime Agency," Sophia said, searching her mental list of family funds and major financial names. "NCA, we investigate serious economic crimes." "So you think Mr. Andrews' trading is criminal?" Rogge settled into the main chair and peered around the room. "Making tens of billions from a small amount of capital, there are reasons to suspect cross-border crime," Sophia answered. "Please, Mr. Andrew, come back to the bureau with us for questioning. That includes you and Thompson." Aaliyah added, though she still balked at the oddness of the situation. "Our operations are legal and compliant. We can show transaction sources and fund flows." Andrew began, but Rogge raised a hand to silence him. He didn't intend to let Andrew babble while their visitors dug for prejudice. "Rogge, Thompson murmured, raising a hand as if to cast a spell. Rogge shook his head. "May I ask who this lady is?" he said to Aaliyah. "And the United States SEC representative in Britain," she replied crisply. "The United States?" Rogge frowned and shot a reproving glance at Andrew. "Couldn't afford a translator?" The room erupted in laughter. The British officials looked amused at what they considered an awkward American title. They weren't about to offend the United States, but they relished the moment. Aaliyah bristled at the childish mockery. "My time is valuable. Send someone else from the SEC next time if you want to step on people's toes," Rogge said dryly. "You're calling me eccentric?" Aaliyah stood, shocked at the insult from someone she had assumed was a child. The assembled Britons watched, half mocking, half amused, as if itching to stick that label on her forehead. "You'll regret this," Aaliyah snapped, then slammed the door in their faces as she left. "Americans have long reach, but this is Financial City, not Wall Street. I don't think she'd be so loud if she were on Wall Street either." "So," Rogge mused, "why come to arrest an honest, law-abiding man like Mr. Andrew? He's a vulnerable member of society. Are you going to drag an innocent citizen into a black site and waterboard him until he confesses to crimes? Then shoot him so you can take his money?" Rogge's words were sharp, meant to sting. "You're misunderstanding," Sophia began, but Rogge cut her off. "Misunderstanding? Then explain why you're here." "It's Aaliyah," Sophia said. "Andrew's bets were huge, and they caused trouble for other parties. Powerful parties. Other parties? Rothschild and Morgan?" Rogge's tone hardened. He'd heard Andrew cursing outside the door and now put names to it. "Those parasitic capitalists," he added, his voice rising in righteous anger. "I understand your regulatory duties, but think of ordinary people. The powerful feast on the big fish, while the rest of us can't even get a chicken leg. Focus on the people and officials who exploit legal loopholes, not squeezing the little guy." "Little guy?" The others exchanged glances. Everyone in Financial City knew Andrew had made a fortune by betting against two major institutions. If he was a little guy, what did that make them? "Andrew, if they won't let us defend you," Rogge said with sudden calm, "go find Oppenheimer, find Stanley, get them to play a big hand. Put all the remaining funds into shorting the pound. Drive it down. Let the Prime Minister and the Chancellor of the Exchequer explain themselves to the voters." "Mr. Rogge, please," Sophia tried to restrain him. "This is a normal investigation. There's no need for theatrics." "A normal investigation?" Rogge snorted. "I hear MI5. Is their officer a Soviet spy fresh from Cambridge? Are they arresting people because some phantom ideology offends them?" "That's MI6. We're MI5. We don't have Soviet spies," the man standing in the doorway suddenly blurted, surprising everyone. "Is that so?" How noble, Rogge replied acidly. Then why don't you take your noble selves to Wall Street? That's the real nest for shorting and skullduggery. And are you sure this operation is compliant? He slammed his palm on the table for emphasis. No one in the room dared to claim absolute compliance. The truth was they'd come because Andrew had refused to play nice with the financial magnates. If you think Andrew has nobody to turn to, then listen carefully, Rogge said, voice low and lethal. He has the Travis family behind him. Chapter 31, King's Cross Station. Travis? The Muggles exchanged glances. They'd never heard that surname in Britain. Go back and ask around, preferably the departments that handle unusual incidents. Roger leaned back slightly, not expecting them to understand he meant the wizarding world. Are you still waiting for me to buy you coffee? Under Roger's rebuke, the group hurried in, then filed out in a huff. The employees of the Financial City building could only watch the closed wooden door from a distance, guessing what had been discussed inside. Mr. Roger, I'm sorry. I'll handle it properly, and the money will be secretly transferred into your name. Andrew stammered. Forget it. Since it's already out, there's no need to hide. Roger shook his head. How much profit did we make this time? After deducting the high interest, there's still $10.5 billion, Andrew reported quickly, a hint of pride in his voice. $10.5 billion. Thompson's face filled with regret. Had he known sooner, he would have emptied the Ministry of Magic and jumped in himself. Cousin, you'll also get $1 billion. Ah, haha, I almost forgot. Take care of the loose ends, and you can take your dividend as agreed. No problem, Andrew answered immediately. Not all wizards handled things the way a Muggle would. Thompson's first instinct when threatened by Muggles was always to raise his wand. Thompson, manage the Ministry's galleons carefully. Don't let anyone get hold of them, and the conversion from Muggle currency to galleons. The capital is large, but I'll think of something. You need to aim higher. Don't be a little wizard forever. Can you really exchange this much Muggle money with your current position and influence? I know, but Roger, the magical world can't absorb such an enormous amount of capital overnight. Look farther. This world isn't just Britain, and Gringotts isn't only the bank in Diagon Alley. Find the right opportunity, ideally convert it all at once so the goblins don't notice anything. I understand. If I can't exchange it all... Thompson rubbed his nose. His dividend was plenty to him, but a drop compared to Roger's. Andrew, take the extra money and set up an investment company. Next month I'll go to Hogwarts. If anything comes up, you can contact Jessica. Roger waved his wand and cast a cleaning charm on Andrew. The Soviet Union is about to collapse. The Iron Curtain will fall. I know. The bamboo curtain will come down too. Are you an idiot? Roger snapped. Is there a bigger market than that right now? It's a miracle if a python swallows an elephant and doesn't die. The only thing left is to hide and slowly digest. If anyone asks you to invest, refuse unless I say otherwise. I understand. I'll handle everything properly and await your orders. Andrew wiped his brow. If he botched the operation, what good would he be? He followed closely behind Roger as the others looked on in shock at the little wizard walking in the middle. Andrew's team, a group of financial elites from prestigious schools, had accompanied him downstairs to see Roger. The merciless financial district didn't care about age or morals. Money was the only truth. The doorman watched the procession of people surrounding the little wizard and wondered if he'd missed a profitable opportunity. This bottle of 1926 Macallan is for you. Celebrate with your team. Roger handed the whiskey to Andrew and left the Financial City with Thompson. A wizard's daily life could be as ordinary as anyone else's, and Roger's was particularly uneventful. He ate and slept and ate. He increasingly felt like a lazy dragon. Back home, Jessica measured her son's height and smiled at how much he had grown. On September 1st, Roger was still sound asleep when Bubble shouted, "Little master, it's time to get up. If you don't hurry, we'll miss the Hogwarts train." Ah, what time is it? Roger blinked at his wristwatch. There were still 4 hours until the 11 o'clock departure. Hurry and pack. Bubbles packed breakfast for you. You can eat it on the train, Jessica urged. King's Cross Station, platform 9 3/4. Ready? Ready. Roger jumped up and high-fived his mother. thanks to the undetectable extension charm bag Elvin had given him. Elvin would deny it, of course. Roger's luggage was simple. An old-fashioned backpack with textbooks and tools, an old leather satchel with the newly bought Snowy Owl, Sailor, and a box of school uniforms. Jessica had thoughtfully prepared several sets of formal robes. Let's go. They climbed into the car and headed to King's Cross Station, the classic building that had stood since the previous century. Roger carried his things but couldn't help grumbling inwardly. Even this Maybach is too classic. It feels like carrying the weight of history. Do you remember our platform? Jessica asked again. 9 3/4, I remember. Roger pointed toward the wall between platform 9 and 10, where young witches and wizards pushing luggage occasionally ran toward the barrier and vanished. Mom, the ministry staff there must be very busy, Roger said sympathetically. There must be a lot of non-magical people who see that and then have memory charms cast on them. Their salaries are higher for a reason. They earn it, Jessica said, hand in hand with her son. They stepped onto the platform where a dark red steam engine waited, its golden nameplate reading Hogwarts Express, 5972. Oh, what's with the sudden sigh? Jessica looked at Roger, puzzled. The new students around them were all excitement. Is something wrong? Mom, don't you think it's too old? It should be in a museum. I'm amazed a nearly 200-year-old train still runs. Jessica smiled. The train may look old, but it carries the imagination of the entire wizarding world for every child who boards it. Its historical value far exceeds its appearance. It's a bridge that links every student to Hogwarts. That's why we keep it. And it's enchanted. Its magic goes beyond what any Muggle technology could do. She kissed his cheek before sending him aboard the express. Roger turned, hugged Jessica, and only let go after a long time. Since coming over, they hadn't been apart for long stretches, and the thought of months without each other dampened their faces. All right, other kids are watching. Aren't you afraid of being embarrassed? Jessica squatted to meet him and kissed his cheek again. Go on, and remember to take lots of photos at school. Have Sailor send them back. I will, Mom. I'll miss you. Roger nodded reluctantly. I'll miss you too. Now go and embrace life at Hogwarts. Jessica fought back tears and watched him walk into the carriage, saw him put his things away, and they waved through the window. Jessica turned and walked away, rubbing at the corners of her eyes without meaning to. Careful, child, Jessica called out. I'm sorry, madam. Harry stopped awkwardly, adjusting his glasses. Chapter 32, Sleeping Beauty. It's all right, come over here, so people who come in later don't bump into you, Jessica said with a smile as she helped Harry pull his trunk over. What a beautiful snowy owl, she added when she saw Hedwig perched on the cart. Madam, her name is Hedwig, Harry replied, flushing. Is that so? Then she must be a wonderful companion, Jessica said. My son has a snowy owl too, Celeritas. We call him Sailor, hoping he'll be as fast as the wind. Just then, Ron came running up. Oh, isn't it amazing? Ron shouted, turning to Harry. Yes, it's like a dream, Harry said, nodding. The wizarding world is incredible. Jessica watched the two boys chat animatedly, and her smile deepened. Little wizards should be bright and lively like this, she thought, not cooped up studying all the time. Listening to their laughter made her think of Roger, and a small ache softened her face. Ron, out of the way! Don't block this lady! Mrs. Weasley bustled in with Ginny and hauled him aside. It's quite all right, Jessica said, smiling. I hope you all have a healthy, happy time at Hogwarts. Mrs. Weasley watched Jessica's figure as she walked away, puzzling over something familiar in her face. What's up, Mum? Ron asked, craning his neck. I think I've seen her somewhere before, Mrs. Weasley muttered, then hurried the children onto the train. Roger sat alone in a compartment, having arrived early and been the only passenger there. He was eating breakfast when a chubby little wizard peered in nervously. Please, may I sit here? The boy asked. Of course, sit anywhere you like, Roger said. The boy opposite had a round, freckled face and, aside from a slight stutter, would have looked very endearing. My name is Neville Longbottom. This is my pet toad. His name is... He trailed off, scratching his head as he stared at the toad clutched in his hand. The toad looked ready to hop. Hey, your toad's going to jump, Roger warned. Startled, Neville jerked awake and said, Oh, thank you. I've been a bit forgetful since I was little. Yes, his name is Leafu. My Uncle Algie gave him to me. Leifu, a good name, Roger said, though he wasn't fond of toads. He found himself quietly impressed by Neville. Neville's parents had both belonged to the Order of the Phoenix, and on the eve of the final battle, had been captured by Bellatrix and tortured with the Cruciatus until they lost their minds. Neville had been only a baby and had witnessed it. A wizard who rescued them had used a memory charm on him to spare him the memory, which explained his forgetfulness. Perhaps you'll need a strong mind to put the pieces back together one day, Roger said, finishing his meal and wiping his mouth with a napkin. Truth? Neville asked, puzzled, as if a piece of something important had slipped his mind. I'm going to rest. Do you mind if I draw the curtain? Roger pulled out the compartment's blue moonlight curtain and shut it without waiting for an answer. Okay, Neville said, watching him oddly. Roger emptied a small vial of silvery blue liquid into his mouth. The potion looked like a flowing galaxy, and within seconds his eyelids began to droop. He forced himself to stay awake long enough to pull a blanket from his bag and cover himself, then fell asleep as if cut down. Hello, is anyone sitting here? A brown-haired girl entered. She frowned at the sofa taken up by the sleeping boy and turned to Neville. Please, may I sit? Thank you. My name is Hermione Granger, she said apologetically. Everywhere else seems full. She glanced at the dozing boy, wondering how anyone could sleep before the train had even pulled out of the station. His name is, Neville said, staring at the ceiling and looking embarrassed. I think I forgot to ask. Hermione, this is my pet. His name is Leifu, Neville said, offering the toad. Hermione managed a strained smile. Leifu, what a handsome toad. With the opposite sofa entirely occupied by the sleeping stranger, Hermione sat next to Neville. Leifu was quiet and kept to himself, which was fortunate. The train gave a long, piercing whistle that failed to rouse the sleeper. Hermione peered at him and teased. It seems he's not very keen on Hogwarts. Maybe we should call him Sleeping Beauty. Sleeping Beauty. I think I've heard that name before, Neville said slowly. I think he's sleeping so soundly it must be the effect of a potion. He described the potion to Hermione, the same silvery blue liquid that looked like a tiny galaxy. Hermione frowned. I haven't seen that potion in Magical Drafts and Potions, she said, thoughtful. Could he have drunk something advanced? What? Neville asked, bewildered. We haven't read that book yet, our first-year potion book. Haven't you read it? Aren't we supposed to read it in class? Neville asked, genuinely confused. Hermione realized he was hopelessly forgetful and changed the subject, switching to the lighter topic of their Hogwarts letters and the funny ways they had arrived. During their chat, Neville suddenly went pale. Leifu? Where are you, Leifu? He called, panic rising in his voice. Maybe he hopped onto Sleeping Beauty, Hermione suggested, nodding toward the sleeper. Neville leaned over and poked the sleeping boy a few times. Roger didn't stir. He's not dead, is he? Neville whispered, face blanched. Can't you see his chest rising and falling? Hermione said, rolling her eyes. He's just a very heavy sleeper. Hermione's eyes lit with mischief. In fairy tales, Sleeping Beauty wakes with a prince's kiss. Why don't you kiss him? Maybe that will wake him. Ah, Neville shrank back. Fairy tales say the princess is kissed by the prince, don't they? No, stop. Hermione laughed at Neville's confusion and shook her head. All right, you turn him over and have a look. Neville did his best, nearly dropping the boy onto the floor in his awkwardness, but found no sign of Leifu. Maybe Leifu hopped into another compartment. Let's split up and look, Hermione suggested. If we each take a side, we'll find him quicker. Neville nodded. Leifu had a habit of getting lost, but always found his way back. The train puffed white steam as it sped toward the Scottish Highlands. Despite the presence of their profoundly sleeping companion, fate had its way, and before long, Hermione's path led her to meet Harry and Ron on the train. In the end, though, Leifu was nowhere to be found. As the lights in the compartment clicked on one by one, Hermione and Neville had no choice but to return to their seats, empty-handed and still hoping the toad would turn up. Chapter 33, Grindelwald's Pictures. Hello, I'm Hermione Granger. Hermione frowned at the boy who had only woken up that evening and scolded him without preamble. You're taking up half the compartment by yourself. You might make it hard for the other new students to find a seat. Ah! Hermione. Rogge blinked, still groggy. He took in the girl in front of him and couldn't help smiling at the coincidence. He'd picked the compartment at random and ended up here first. Could it be I drank Felix Felicis? He slapped his thigh as if a memory had just struck him. Hermione jumped. Sorry. I just remembered something about potions. He grinned apologetically. Rogge Travis? Potions? Hermione asked bluntly. Is that the potion that made you sleep like Sleeping Beauty? Sleeping Beauty? Rogge looked baffled. When did someone call him that? We saw you sleeping so soundly like a fairy tale princess, Neville said. He looked at Rogge for confirmation. Rogge, in the story, doesn't the princess wake the prince with a kiss? Huh? Rogge's eyes widened. He'd never read that tale. He wanted to find out more. Fairy tales are lies, Rogge muttered, noticing Hermione's expression. He pivoted the conversation back. Anyway, potions. Felix Felicis. It's a potion that brings good luck. Hermione hesitated. She'd read a lot, but admitted she hadn't seen everything in the more advanced potion texts. She refused to be outdone, though. That's just its name. It doesn't mean you can make it. You're right, Rogge said, but it's on the Newt syllabus. When a wizard drinks that golden potion, they get a rush of good fortune. The formula's complicated. It takes 6 months to brew properly. He watched Hermione's face fall and added lightly, Miss Know-It-All, maybe it's time you read some advanced potions books. Hermione's eyes flashed. She was annoyed, almost teary. Rogge tried to smooth things over. Don't be angry. I'll buy you snacks. His stomach gave a loud protest. He hunted down the trolley witch and cleared the shelves. Pumpkin pasties, Bertie Bott's every flavor beans, cauldron cakes. The vendor laughed as Rogge handed over the galleons. You're the second person to empty the shelf today, she said. And you won't even haggle? Rogge feigned regret, and the woman relented, slipping him an extra chocolate frog. Based on my years of collecting, the wizard card inside this one's rare, she whispered, hoping to placate him. Rogge opened the wrapping. The chocolate frog bounded out, and he caught it in midair. He bit off its head, and a sticky filling oozed out. Hermione made a face. Rogge licked his lips with unapologetic appetite. The magical treats were unlike anything in his old life. Neville's frog ran off and Hermione began, but Neville waved it off. He didn't mind at all. Rogge flipped the chocolate frog card he'd pulled open and froze. The card showed a dark figure. Grindelwald, the dark wizard imprisoned in the highest cell of Nurmengard. Hermione and Neville crowded around the picture and read the blurb aloud. Defeated by the wizard Dumbledore in 1945, Neville read, discovered 12 uses for dragon blood, made notable advances in alchemy with his partner Nicholas Flamel. It's really him, Hermione exclaimed. Neville studied the card like a treasure. Nicholas Flamel? I used to mix him up with Mainstein, he admitted sheepishly. Rogge shook his head. Mainstein was a Nazi officer, remember? Hermione shot him a look. Your European history is terrible. Still, Mainstein sounds cooler than Nicholas Flamel, Rogge said, finishing the last cauldron cake and rubbing his half-full stomach. The every flavor beans had betrayed him. One tasted like boogers, and he swore off them forever. He wasn't Forrest Gump. He wasn't going to gamble on the next flavor. Neville eyed the Grindelwald card hungrily. Rogge, can I trade all my cards for that? He asked cautiously. Rogge laughed. Don't call it mine. That one belongs to Headmaster Dumbledore. He flipped through Neville's pile. They were mostly common figures from the British magical world. Grindelwald, a European Dark Lord with a complicated history with Dumbledore, would be rare here. It's a fair trade, Rogge said, but think carefully. You've been collecting those a long time. It's fine, Neville said, unhesitating. I have duplicates. I even have 8 Dumbledores. He pushed the cards over and carefully tucked Grindelwald into his pocket. Rogge rifled through the chocolate frog packaging and, to his surprise, found 3 Dumbledore cards. Maybe in the German magical world, Dumbledore was the rare one. Neville, you must keep that safe, Rogge warned, and absolutely don't let the headmaster see it. His tone made Hermione's gossip instincts flare. Is there a story between the greatest white wizard and Grindelwald? Hermione asked immediately, her imagination already running wild. Not exactly a love story, Rogge said, amused by her leap in logic. But there was an accident. They had a blood pact. A blood pact? What's that? Hermione's eyes lit up. Dumbledore and Grindelwald have a secret. It's not a secret, Rogge thought for a moment, but no one mentions it anymore. Why? Before he could answer, the Hogwarts Express slid into the station. The whistle blew, and a chorus of voices rose outside, urging the first years to disembark. All right, first years, this way, Hagrid called, lantern held high. As a half-giant, he towered even over the engine, his bulk blocking much of the lamp's light. Older students opened the carriage doors, calling reminders not to take luggage off the train. Hurry up, follow me! Hagrid waved from the front, and the little wizards fell in behind him. The path he led them along was miserable, dark, wet, and slick. Even with the lantern, most of the light was swallowed by Hagrid's enormous frame. If Rogge hadn't had night vision, he would have worried about slipping. The other first years stuck close together, terrified of missing a turn. Hermione, you know Lumos, right? Rogge whispered, nodding at her wand. Of course! Hermione straightened proudly. She raised her wand and pronounced the spell. A bright light flared from its tip and pushed back the shadows. Neville's grip on Rogge's robe loosened. The light eased his fear. This is a basic first-year spell, Hermione said with barely concealed pride, like a swan with its head held high. If you'd practiced it before. I tried, but my wand was confiscated, Rogge shrugged. He hoped his wand would be returned soon. He had, in fact, brought an old wand as a precaution, and he could do some magic wandlessly. But he didn't want to waste it. His wandless Lumos tended to surge far beyond what was necessary. If he used it full strength, half the forest might be lit up. He pictured Dumbledore and Voldemort noticing and shook the thought away. Stop fantasizing about fireworks, he told himself. Study hard, get better, and don't always chase flashy tricks. Let others do the bloody dying. He would be there to gather the spoils. No more than 4 to a boat, Hagrid barked as they reached a rough dock. Small boats with lanterns bobbed in the water, waiting. 4 people per boat, 4 founders, Hermione declared confidently. Rogge had read the same book. The symbolism was familiar. Do you know the 4 houses? She asked. Rogge sat at the stern and, without waiting for Hermione to finish, recited what he'd read. Slytherin tends to have many pure-blood wizards, clever and cunning. Ravenclaw is full of studious children. Well, I love studying. Gryffindor is the brave lot. Hufflepuff has the most people, humble and hard-working. Hermione, which house do you want? Ravenclaw? Ileana, a girl sharing their boat, asked. I don't know, Hermione admitted, torn. Ravenclaw sounded appealing after Rogge's description. Rogge closed his eyes and ran through possibilities in his head, imagined nudges, tiny mental experiments. Tell Hermione she'd fit better in Ravenclaw. Have her vow to compete with him for top marks. Warn her Gryffindor already had you-know-who in it. He tried each little mental push, watched the different scenarios unfold in his imagination, and every time the same result arrived. No matter what he did, the Sorting Hat seemed determined to put Hermione in Gryffindor. Looking up at the vast silhouette of Hogwarts ahead, Rogge had to admit that Dumbledore's influence was everywhere. While he'd slept on the train, maybe even before that, Dumbledore had already set things in motion. Harry's companions had been picked. What about me? Rogge wondered, glancing at Neville at the bow. The forgetful boy, too, felt like fate's chosen. No one can stop what the old man set in motion, Rogge thought, with rueful resignation. Fate, it seemed, was not something to be tinkered with. There were stories from his old life that the Sorting Hat could probe minds with legitimacy to decide placements. He hadn't experienced it himself, so he couldn't say for sure. As for occlumency, he'd barely been able to scratch its surface. If an 11-year-old really could hide thoughts so well that others suspected dark influences, Dumbledore might very well conclude the child was possessed by Voldemort, and act as if an Avada Kedavra were merited. The thought made him frown, and then he let it go. He didn't have the access or the time to learn such arts now. The boat eased out across the Black Lake. Under the moon, Hogwarts unfolded. Turrets and towers, the astronomy tower thrusting up into the sky, windows glowing like pinpricks of yellow. Neville lay forward on his knees, excitement making his voice bright as he took it in. Hello, I'm Hermione, she offered to a girl beside her. Hello, I'm Ileana, the girl replied, smiling. They held their lanterns and gaped at the castle. Rogge, however, cared less for grandeur than for dinner. The trip from London to the Highlands had left him both sleepy and hungry. From the minute he thought of home, he was imagining Chinese food. Bubble could make real dishes, he reminded himself. Twice-cooked pork, mapo tofu, hot and sour soup, xiaolong bao. His stomach grumbled obligingly. Rogge, I suspect there's a dragon in your stomach, Hermione teased when she heard it. Maybe there is, he said, stretching and staring up at the stars. Why do you keep giving me nicknames? He asked her suddenly. Sleeping Beauty, Dragon Belly. Hermione shrugged. A lady doesn't have to respect someone who behaves like a gentleman if he doesn't look like one, she added, tugging Ileana along with a smirk. Sleeping Beauty? Ileana said, puzzled but amused. In the week since his conditioning with blue moonlight, Rogge's body had grown stronger. He still looked slimmer than Neville, but his face, laid back in the stern of the boat, made an impression even without effort. Hermione bent close and whispered a secret to Ileana. They giggled. Apparently someone had actually slept through the train ride. Rogge heaved a mock sigh. Miss Granger, he murmured, could you keep it quiet? I'd rather not have that nickname spread around Hogwarts. Humph, Hermione sniffed and led the girls away. Look, Hogwarts, Neville interrupted, pointing. Hermione glanced at him. Neville, are you going to tell a professor you're Toad, Trevor? Leifu, Neville blurted. Leifu is missing, he mumbled, trying to reassure himself. Leif'll come back. He always does. This time, Neville sounded less confident. Hogwarts lay across the lake. A small toad couldn't reasonably hop that far without getting exhausted. Rogge put a hand on the boy's shoulder. Maybe Leifu made it to Hogwarts already, he said kindly. Let's hope he did. Chapter 35, Sorting Ceremony. The first years passed through the tall oak doors, rounded the staircase, and immediately saw Professor McGonagall waiting for them outside the Great Hall. Welcome to Hogwarts, Professor McGonagall said, greeting each of them in turn and going over a few important instructions. Soon you will pass through those doors and meet your new classmates. But before you take your seats, you must be sorted into your houses. At the mention of the sorting hat, everyone fell silent. Roger watched McGonagall eagerly, wondering when his wand would be returned after registration. Professor McGonagall continued, At the end of the school year, the house with the most points will be awarded the House Cup. Just as she finished speaking, a croaking sound came from the steps. Neville jumped. He'd recognized the toad immediately. Leifu, he darted forward, overjoyed, and scooped up the small creature. How did you guess? Hermione asked Roger in a low voice, surprised. Ileana, standing nearby, looked equally curious. Could Roger be some kind of seer? Don't look at me. I was just saying whatever, Roger replied, then glanced toward McGonagall as if to ask, Where's my wand? Professor McGonagall gave Neville a stern look and signaled him back into line. The other first-years giggled at Neville's comic excitement, and some of the older students' laughter was sharper, mocking him as a dull fellow. The sorting ceremony is about to begin, McGonagall announced, then led the way into the Great Hall, ignoring the hopeful look in some pupils' eyes. It seems the rumors on the train were true. Harry Potter really is here. Draco Malfoy stepped forward to offer his hand. His arrogance made Harry uncomfortable, and Malfoy's sneering remarks about Ron only made Harry feel more disgusted. The boy's overbearing, spiteful manner reminded Harry unpleasantly of Dudley. He refused Malfoy's outstretched hand without hesitation. Seeing the first years lingering, McGonagall came back out onto the platform and tapped Malfoy aside with a rolled parchment. Are you ready? Follow me, she urged. Roger, trailing behind, kept thinking, My wand! Professor McGonagall! Then the doors swung open and the great hall spread out before them. The dark ceiling glittered with stars like a real night sky, and rows of candles floated in midair, their light matching the braziers along the walls. 4 long tables were set out, each crowded with students in black robes, each table belonging to one of the 4 houses. Roger looked at the pointed hats and couldn't help laughing. The more I look, the more they look like pajamas. At the end of the hall, on the staff table, Headmaster Dumbledore sat with his silver beard, flanked by the other professors. Hermione and Ileana walked together, pointing up at the ceiling. The ceiling isn't actually the sky, it's a spell, Hermione explained. I read about it in Hogwarts, a history. Miss Know-it-all, Roger said admiringly, half teasing. That ceiling was designed by Rowena Ravenclaw, the most learned of the founders. It's not just an illusion, it's clever magic. It's the whole castle's work of Ravenclaw, he went on, wanting Hermione to remember the name. Incredible spatial control and transfiguration. Actually, it's not only decorative, the ceiling keeps time with the actual sky. Hermione frowned. Whenever he called her Miss Know-It-All, Roger launched into a flood of facts she couldn't easily contradict. How do you know transfiguration was used? She demanded. You may be right, Roger said, catching himself. I apologize, Miss Granger. I first thought Ravenclaw used transfiguration to move the stars, but it's almost certainly illusion magic. The old records call it an ancient spell that can project the sky in real time, changing to match what's outside. Hermione nodded, surprised at the depth behind the spectacle. She thanked Roger for the explanation, though she still scowled at being called Miss Know-It-All. That's an insult, she hissed and pulled Ileana along. Professor McGonagall led the first years between the long tables and up to the stool at the foot of the staff platform. On it sat the Sorting Hat, battered and patched, its crease and stitches giving it a rather grim appearance. The hat began to sing, describing the qualities of the four houses in its off-key way. The teachers, used to the annual ritual, applauded. The first years were astonished. A singing hat was not something anyone expected. Before we begin, McGonagall said from the platform, Headmaster Dumbledore would like to say a few words. Dumbledore stepped forward. Roger braced for the kind of long-winded speech he'd heard jokes about, but, to his relief, the headmaster was brief. He gave only a couple of clear warnings. Students are strictly forbidden from entering the Forbidden Forest. He added Dumbledore's dry aside, mimicking the caretaker's tone. And Mr. Filch has asked me to remind you, if you don't want to die, do not enter the corridor on the right side of the 4th floor. Dumbledore's tone grew gentler as his eyes paused over Harry. For Harry Potter, our savior, you'll find certain things have been prepared for your growth. Roger, knowing something of how the year's plot would unfold, glanced at Snape and Professor Quirrell sitting near each other. It was an odd arrangement. Possibly Dumbledore was already aware of the secret Quirrell carried about the back of his head. McGonagall opened her list and lifted the Sorting Hat. When I call your name, come forward. I will place the hat on your head, and it will tell us your house. It was time for the sorting. Roger had his own plans. He wasn't going to be pulled into Dumbledore's private tutorials tailored to Harry. But for now the hall watched, waiting for the first name to be called and for the hat to decide the fates of their new classmates. Thanks to 9-dimensional Sky for the reward. Thanks to Yongdong, Richterbach Lev, fortunately, Unmuxi Pure Gen, Who Dares to Be Poorer Than Me, Joe Rui BC, Flying Gudola, and all other readers for your support. Thank you for the rewards, monthly votes, recommendation tickets, and comments. I am very grateful. Chapter 36. Whose Idea? Hannah Abbott. The moment she stepped out of line, she stumbled and nearly fell, which brought a ripple of laughter from the other students. Hannah, cheeks flushed, hurriedly put the Sorting Hat on, praying the shabby thing wouldn't swallow her whole. The hat seemed both amused and exasperated by the little witch's thoughts, and almost at once announced, Hufflepuff. A cheer rose from the Hufflepuff table as they welcomed their new member. Hannah, nervous and excited, darted over to sit with them. Protagonists come and go, but Hannah is forever, murmured Rogge under his breath as he silently recited his own surname, Travis. He was one of the last in line. Hermione Granger. When Professor McGonagall called her name, Hermione hurried forward. The Sorting Hat sat on her head for a moment, muttered thoughtfully, then declared, Gryffindor. As expected, Rogge said without looking at her, his attention fixed on Dumbledore. He watched the headmaster fold his hands and watch Hermione rush into the Gryffindor row with calm satisfaction. A witch so hungry for knowledge ending up in Gryffindor, if Rowena Ravenclaw were still around, she'd be furious at that old man, Rogge thought. Draco Malfoy. Malfoy climbed to the platform, and before the hat had even settled, it snapped. Slytherin! Poor child, Rogge said, seeing Malfoy's triumphant smirk. He worried for the boy. Wouldn't a quiet Hufflepuff life have been kinder to someone so naive? Susan Bones, Hufflepuff. Next came Ron Weasley. Unsurprisingly, like his family before him, he was sorted into Gryffindor. The Weasleys were as predictable as the Malfoys in their house loyalties. Harry Potter. When Professor McGonagall read The Boy Who Lived's name, the great hall fell deadly silent. Every eye turned to the platform to see where Harry would be placed. Dumbledore sat straighter, hands folded, watching with a composed, expectant look. Ileana, sitting beside Rogge, poked his shoulder gently. "Why are you dozing? Harry's up next. Use your prophecy thing. What house is he going to be in?" "Gryffindor." "I'm at the back. Let me sleep a little." Rogge yawned, giving the answer with a shrug. "Heads up, I'm ahead of you." Ileana crowed, proud. "My full name is Ileana Cora Smaug." Rogge noted her triumphant expression and tried to decide if that counted as a win. "Smaug? That's an unusual name." "We're from the Slavic regions," she said with a smile, not elaborating. "Good girl," Rogge muttered, watching the Sorting Hat hesitate on the platform. "Cover for me a moment. I want to doze." "All right, my sleeping beauty princess," Ileana teased, offering her shoulder. "Gryffindor." A roar went up as Harry was declared for Gryffindor. The house's cheers shook the rafters. Professors from Dumbledore on down applauded as Harry walked to the table, prefects shaking his hand, classmates greeting him warmly. Dumbledore even raised a golden goblet in his honor. For the first time since the Dursleys, Harry felt what it was like to be welcomed into a real home. "Rogge, you're amazing. You guessed right again," Ileana whispered, impressed by his accuracy even as he slept. As more names were called, only Ileana and Rogge remained. She had been nudging him for a while, but he'd been sleeping so soundly she'd been loath to move and let him topple. "Mr. Rogge!" Professor McGonagall finally called, a little exasperated. She raised her voice until Rogge stirred. "Ah, what is it?" he croaked, rubbing his eyes to the amusement of the other students. "Oh, Professor, are you returning my wand?" he asked hopefully. McGonagall only shook her head and set the hat on Ileana's head. "Valuing wisdom, seeking unknown knowledge," the Sorting Hat murmured, then announced, "Ravenclaw." Ileana flushed with pride and delight. Rogge's eyes widened. He hadn't expected the Eastern European girl to be a Ravenclaw. "Rogge Travis. Another pureblood, definitely Slytherin," Ron said confidently from his seat beside Harry. "No, Rogge's understanding of magic is very comprehensive. He'll be Ravenclaw," Hermione countered. She just heard Ron imply that only Slytherin produced bad wizards and bristled at it. "Humph, he's Slytherin. You'll see," Ron snapped back, still annoyed at Hermione from their earlier quarrel on the train. The Sorting Hat paused on Rogge's head, sensing and weighing. A difficult choice. Very talented. I sense dragon's blood and the moon." Rogge blinked. "You can smell that? You don't even have a nose." "I may not have a nose, but I have supreme wisdom. I can glean talents from thoughts and auras," the Hat boasted. "Extraordinary skill in spellwork and potions." "How about Gryffindor?" Rogge suggested. "Why not?" "Gryffindor," the Hat scoffed. "What good is mindless bravery? I loathe that kind of courage." "There's a Gryffindor dean right there," Rogge said, nodding toward McGonagall. "Oh." The Sorting Hat nodded, then shouted, "Slytherin." "See? I told you." Ron crowed, smug. He had been certain. Hermione looked unsettled as Rogge walked toward the Slytherin table. Their values were so different, she worried for him. The Slytherin prefects rose to welcome him. There was a show of particular interest when Malfoy recognized Rogge's name. "You're from the Travis family?" Malfoy asked, eyes bright. He'd heard the name before. "That's right," Rogge said coolly, taking a seat without much attention to Malfoy. The house welcomes died down only when McGonagall tapped a spoon against a glass, her voice bringing the hall to order. "Everyone, please pay attention." Her words echoed, and the students quieted at once. Chapter 37, King of the Table. Headmaster Dumbledore nodded, stood, and announced, "Let the feast begin." Suddenly, an abundance of food and drink appeared on the 4 long tables. Golden plates and goblets sparkled, reflecting the candlelight. Harry stared at the plate in front of him, roast beef, chicken legs, sausages, fruit, and rich gravy piled high, and swallowed hard. He had never eaten like this at the Dursleys. Ron, to his left, was already attacking his food, clutching a chicken leg and a steak as if he wanted to devour a whole pig in 3 bites. Hermione served herself some herb-roasted chicken and roasted potatoes, but still worried about her teeth, picked carefully and avoided ice cream and other desserts. Across the hall at the Slytherin table, Malfoy clinked goblets with Crabbe and Goyle and tucked into roasted pork chops and onion soup. Sitting opposite them, Rogge Travis ate with an odd combination of elegance and feverish speed. The Ravenclaw table sat nearby, Ileana laughed when she saw Rogge's empty plate and raised her juice to him, convinced by Hermione's earlier remark, "A dragon's stomach." Rogge raised his glass in return. He had to admit the Hogwarts house elves knew how to cook. The feast quickly drew ghosts from all over the castle, nearly headless Nick, the bloody baron, the fat friar, the gray lady, who drifted through the tables. One ghost even emerged among the platters and made a show of greeting him. Rogge suppressed his annoyance. "Magic world," he muttered to himself. "Magic world. Gray lady, would you mind not coming up through the table?" he said aloud before he could stop himself. He hated the way ghosts turned a beautiful spread into something that looked like leftovers. A true lady respects food. He bit into another piece of steak and, to the astonishment of the first years, reached for a fresh plate as well. Of course, that includes gentlemen. In the blink of an eye, Rogge had finished the steak in front of him and piled another plate on top. He ate with a strange, fascinating contradiction, perfectly refined manners, but unnaturally fast. Hermione's eyes widened as he kept at it, confirming what she'd seen earlier. "A dragon's stomach," she whispered. Malfoy stood frozen. He hadn't even finished his first steak before Rogge's plates were gone. "Is the Travis family appetite always like this?" he asked, aghast. "Special circumstances," Rogge said with a wry smile, avoiding details. "Just for this past month, it'll pass." He did not like being so conspicuous, but every cell in him felt like it was screaming, hungry. After a sixth helping of ice cream, Rogge finally burped and felt about 80% full. Around him, people breathed easier, especially Professor McGonagall up at the high table. She looked as if she had been keeping an eye on him. Logically, Snape should have been the one to watch his first years, but the Slytherin head and Professor Quirrell were engrossed in conversation and oblivious to the new student's alarming appetite. If Rogge didn't slow down, McGonagall mused, she might have to send him to the hospital wing for Madame Pomfrey to check him over. "Ugh, eating is exhausting." Rogge stretched and sighed dramatically. The students at his table wore amused, baffled expressions. Even a dragon, they decided, would have to rest after that. When the feast ended, Malfoy had managed only one steak. His first day had turned sour. His attempt at friendship with Harry had been rejected in front of everyone, and now he had encountered a Travis family oddity who'd stolen the table. The others smiled politely at Rogge, with some relief and a tacit agreement to keep a little distance next time. Slytherin's common room entrance lay apart from the others. Prefect Marcus led the first years to the seemingly ordinary stretch of wall, stepped forward, and gave the password, green silver. A smooth, brick-formed snake rose from the base of the wall, arched into an opening, and revealed the door behind it. "The password changes every 2 weeks, Marcus told them as they went through. "It will be posted in advance on the common room bulletin board. Repeat it once more so you remember." They filed into a dim passage where moss on the walls glowed faint green. At the end of the corridor lay the Slytherin common room, a luxurious space built of black Gothic marble at the bottom of the lake. Its ceiling was a transparent crystal dome. By day, you could see the rippling water above. Green glowing lamps hung from chains, a finely carved mantel framed a fireplace, and heavy chairs clustered nearby. Through the windows, one could often spot giant squid and other strange water creatures drifting by. "Welcome to Slytherin," Marcus announced. "Boys' dormitories are to the left, girls to the right. Your luggage has already been brought to your rooms by the house elves, though our house is a bit far from the owlery. But," he smiled, revealing large front teeth, "every student in Slytherin has a private dormitory. You'll find your name on the door. If you're caught wandering the castle at night by the caretaker, Mr. Filch and his infernal tabby, you'll lose points. You'll have to win them back yourselves. Our head of house, Professor Snape, is excellent. You'll see for yourselves. Our house has won the House Cup 6 years running. I hope we can make that 7, Marcus added. The first years brightened at the idea of joining a proud winning house. Rogge thought, not unkindly, that the film version's portrayal of Marcus didn't do him justice. The boy had managed prefect status for a reason. The female prefect, Emily, stepped forward with the timetables. First years will study 7 subjects this year: transfiguration, potions, defense against the dark arts. Her voice was clear and pleasant as she handed out the schedules. We'll be sharing classes with Gryffindor. She smiled wryly. Just don't be foolish in the Dean's Potions class. There are no wizards more foolish than Gryffindors, Marcus added with a laugh. Prefect selection happens in 5th year, Emily continued. Boys are not allowed in the girls' dormitories. She checked a pocket watch. Curfew is 11 o'clock to 6 in the morning. If you didn't bring an owl, you can go to the West Tower Owlery to borrow a school owl. Hurry if you need one. There's just an hour until curfew. The first years hurried off to find their rooms. Rogge located his and pushed the door open. His trunks had already been brought in. On a nearby table lay the wand that Professor McGonagall had confiscated, and beneath it sat a letter and a small booklet. Chapter 38, Wands and EMP, Rogge Travis. By the time you read this letter, I imagine you have already taken hold of your wand once more. Ebony, unicorn hair core, 12 inches, quite resilient. Those characteristics make this wand exceptional, and they also suggest its owner will accomplish great things. From our brief meeting in Diagon Alley, I could tell you will become an exceptionally talented wizard. Past misfortunes have not tainted the nobility of your character. You show steadiness and independence, though you have some faults. For instance, you could not resist Mr. Elvin's persistent sales pitches. Perhaps you already know that the wand regulations for wizards who have not yet enrolled at Hogwarts are not enforced 100% of the time. You may feel resentful toward me, wondering why your wand was confiscated and why yours alone. Forgive me, child. The unicorn hair in that wand is connected to an incident 60 years ago, and I had no choice but to take it for confirmation. I apologize, and more importantly, I hope you understand that waiting is a rare virtue. I have sent a house elf with a copy of my old transfiguration notes. Perhaps they will offer some small assistance on your future magical path. Sincerely, Minerva McGonagall. Rogge finished the letter, and for the moment, his irritation toward Professor McGonagall vanished. It was late, though, and he needed to write a reply quickly. He grabbed his quill and filled 3 pages for Jessica. Then he used a little magic to manipulate a camera and take a photograph of himself. Magical photography wasn't instantaneous in the way Muggle instant cameras were. Negatives still had to be developed with a special potion before they could move. Rogge had a sudden flash of inspiration. If someone could invent a magical equivalent of a digital camera or an instant camera, it would sell like wildfire in the wizarding world. He scribbled the idea into his notebook, wrapped the negative with his letter, and hurried out, carrying his knobag. "Excuse me." Rogge rushed into the common room and nearly ran into a girl coming the other way. "It's all right." Daphne smiled. Her light blonde hair fell to her waist and seemed to catch the light. Her clear blue eyes were bright with curiosity. She recognized him. He was the young wizard who had eaten so heartily at the banquet. "You are?" Rogge stared. He had no recollection of her. "My name is Daphne Greengrass," she said, a little taller than him. "Like you, I'm pure blood." "No time. Let's go," Rogge said. He checked the common room clock and realized there were only 10 minutes until curfew. He dashed for the courtyard, pulled his nabag open, and freed his owl. "Sailor, do you see the West Tower? That's where your roost is." He fed the bird some of his rations, slipped the letter into a tiny pouch, and tied it to the owl's leg. "Deliver this to Jessica. If she replies, she can leave it in the Slytherin common room post or the Great Hall." Sailor shot into the night like a white arrow and vanished from sight. "So fast!" Daphne snapped the nabag shut and peered inside. "What is this?" "A bag that holds magical creatures, called a nabag," Rogge explained, then glanced at his wrist. "Huh, broken?" Daphne pointed. On his arm was an ordinary-looking watch. "An electronic watch? How can it be broken?" Rogge patted it. "Nothing. Muggle thing," he said. She frowned. "Hogwarts makes Muggle electronic devices malfunction." "What? There's that kind of magic here? Isn't that like an EMP?" Rogge gaped. All of his Muggle gadgets suddenly stopped working. "EMP? Is that a Muggle word?" Electromagnetic pulse," Rogge managed. He felt a little deflated. The wizarding world wasn't necessarily more advanced than the Muggle one in every way. Daphne shook a silver pocket watch. "We should hurry." Curfew was nearly upon them. They exchanged a look and ran, determined not to be caught by Filch on their first night. "Almost. Just a little bit," Filch muttered, watching helplessly as the two of them slipped around the corner at the last second. Gasping and laughing, Rogge and Daphne tumbled in the common room. That was close. We were nearly nabbed. And they would have docked points from us, Daphne said, clutching her chest with mock horror and then grinning. See you tomorrow, Miss Daphne. Mr. Rogge, remember my surname? She teased. Greengrass, he replied. Good night, Miss Greengrass. Good night. She watched him cross the room, then hurried off to the girls' dormitory. Rogge flopped onto his bed, excited about his first full day at Hogwarts. The next morning, he woke surprisingly early. He reached for the novelty alarm clock beside his bed, a big SpongeBob-shaped thing, but it was dead. I wanted a life less Merlin-like, he muttered, then washed, put on his robes, and tied his tie. He checked his textbooks and wand and headed for the Great Hall. Morning, Hermione, Rogge called toward the Gryffindor table. To his surprise, Hermione Granger was already there. Humph. Hermione snorted and turned away, still stewing about yesterday's sorting. She couldn't get over that Rogge had been placed in Slytherin. She took her plate and left early, clutching her books as if she'd found a new problem to solve. Rogge shrugged. Hermione was a study fiend. Whatever was upsetting her would probably be forgotten by transfiguration after a morning's reading. Good morning, Rogge. Ileana, a Ravenclaw, looked genuinely surprised. I didn't expect our Mr. Sleeping Beauty to be up so early. Ileana, Rogge nodded and glanced at the Ravenclaw table. They were busy and orderly. Most of the other houses were still asleep while the Ravenclaws were already at breakfast. What class do you have this morning? He asked. Potions with Professor Snape, she whispered, a little nervous. The prefect said the potions classroom is in the dungeons. The whole wall of jars is full of specimens. Don't be scared, Rogge told her. Our head of house is a good person, just a bit biased. He wasn't trying to flatter Snape. If anything, the head of Slytherin was strict, but Snape could be perfectly fair to students when it mattered. Rogge lowered his voice and leaned in. I'll tell you a secret. I heard Snape's Patronus has something to do with Gryffindor. A lion? Ileana's eyes widened. The Slytherin head's Patronus is a lion? No, just that it's linked somehow, not necessarily a lion. Rogge chuckled. If Ileana ever delved into Snape's past, she might be shocked. Down in the dungeons, Snape was arranging potion bottles and inexplicably sneezed. He rubbed his nose, unaware of the whispers and half-truths that swirled around him. Good morning, Rogge. Daphne appeared with a cluster of girls and left them to take a seat beside him. You don't always sleep through the day, do you? She asked, eyeing his profile. No one could forget the sleepy, ravenous boy at the sorting ceremony. You're eating so little, she added, astonished. Maybe I remembered wrong yesterday. It's the potion, Rogge explained. The effects have finally worn off. Yesterday, after taking a potion, I got extremely sleepy and hungry, but that won't happen today. Ah, so you might be sleeping in potions class? Daphne asked, genuinely concerned. Chapter 39, Transfiguration and the Animagus. The Dean's first class. I admire you, warrior. Daphne laughed, though she looked worried about what Snape might do to him. It's fine. When the time comes, I'll show the Dean a trick and make him see that me falling asleep in class isn't my fault. Rogge raised an eyebrow and smiled confidently. Not your fault? Then whose? Daphne propped her chin on her hand, eager to hear what magical excuse he'd come up with. Of course the Dean's, he said. Who told him his class was so boring? Daphne widened her eyes and gave him a thumbs up. You must die far away. Don't drag me into this. After breakfast, the great hall hummed like a marketplace. Rogge tucked his Transfiguration textbook under his arm and scanned the courtyard for a clock. None to be found. He made a mental note to get a mechanical watch. Very Merlin, he muttered, amused by yet another small quirk of the British magical world. The booklet McGonagall had given him was practical and dense. Combined with Swish's A Beginner's Guide to Transfiguration, it deepened his understanding. Transfiguration rested on two pillars, the transformability of matter and the caster's will. In her notes, Professor McGonagall suggested that matter's essence is the same across forms, which allows it to be reshaped. Learning the spells and wand movements was only part of it. A wizard also needed a strong will. Rogge nodded. The idea echoed what he'd seen elsewhere. The wizard must hold an unquestioning belief of I am the world. Under that will, the caster channels magic to match their intent. The incantation and wand are merely tools, When a wizard's will is strong enough, they can dispense with tools entirely. Lumos. Rogge couldn't help himself and cast the charm without a wand, lighting a wide area with a sweep of his hand. It was a pure expression of will. Wow, that's so bright. Daphne, leafing through her own textbook nearby, blinked at the sudden light. Why's your Lumos so strong? And you didn't even use a wand. Rogge quickly snuffed the light. It was just as well they were in the courtyard, otherwise he had no idea what uproar he might have caused. Still, the spell left him unsettled. His magic was growing stronger, and he hadn't found a way to control its intensity. At some point, it might make simple spells dangerously powerful. Family secret, not to be shared, he said with a mysterious smile. Daphne rolled her eyes. Rogge laughed and went back to reading. After the basic principles, McGonagall's notes moved into the practical, understanding matter and form. A transfigurer must be able to see through matter's essence, a skill of deconstruction that takes vast knowledge and practice, she wrote. Then she listed types of transfiguration. Basic transfiguration, which transforms one substance into another, shape similarity often being the key. Animal transfiguration, a more advanced charm allowing a wizard to change into an animal. Human transfiguration and non-corporeal transfiguration, both dangerous and beyond the scope of an intro note. Rogge frowned at a blank section under animal transfiguration. McGonagall had deliberately omitted something, the entry on animage, but her comments on the animal transfiguration charm suggested it produced temporary external changes requiring specific incantations and long practice. From that, Rogge inferred that an animagus was a different thing, a permanent, essential transformation. If one could push an animal transfiguration charm far enough in duration, it might look like an animagus, but the essence would still differ. If I could extend an animal transfiguration for 50 years, it'd be indistinguishable in appearance, he mused. When Rogge and Daphne entered the transfiguration classroom, Daphne gasped at the tabby cat perched on the podium. Wow, what a cute cat! Why is there a cat in transfiguration? Rogge forced a smile, pulled a small pouch from his pocket, and handed it to her. Wait a moment. Owl food, basically cat food, found its way into Daphne's hand. She knelt to sprinkle some at the cat's feet, while Rogge almost choked laughing. The cat ignored her offerings and stared at the little wizard with a look that could freeze molten iron. Not cute at all, Daphne muttered, sitting beside Rogge, who had his head on the desk and was shaking to keep from laughing. As Daphne glanced up, she noticed a faint semi-rectangular marking under the cat's eyes, oddly like Professor McGonagall's spectacles. No way! Her face flushed, and she clapped a hand over her mouth to stop herself from laughing out loud. She yanked her foot down hard on Rogge's shin, then hurriedly pretended to read from her book, using it to hide her grin. She had the sudden, violent urge to plunge her wand through the idiot next to her. Students from both houses filled the room. Only Harry and Ron were absent. The little Gryffindors were chatting animatedly, while the Slytherins sat more quietly, cautious about earning points off the dean. The whole class fell into an expectant hush as everyone waited for Professor McGonagall and for the latecomers. Harry and Ron slipped in, trying to be inconspicuous, and headed for the only empty seat, the middle front row. "We made it," Ron whispered, glancing around. "I wonder what face she'll pull when she finds out we were late." Before anyone could answer, the cat on the podium leaped into the air and, mid-flight, changed back into Professor McGonagall. The dean landed with that familiar severe expression, exactly as they'd feared and expected. Rogge and Daphne both gasped. "Is that an advanced transfiguration?" Daphne whispered, eyes wide with curiosity. "Transfiguration doesn't last that long," Rogge replied softly. "That's an animagus." "That's so cool," Ron blurted, staring at Professor McGonagall as if he hadn't realized they were late. Or perhaps this was Weasley-style courage, thoughtless and fearless. "Thank you for your assessment, Mr. Weasley," Professor McGonagall said, stern. "Perhaps I should turn one of you into a pocket watch so the other won't be late." "We got lost," Harry said quickly. "Then turn him into a map. At least a map won't have trouble finding its seat." McGonagall turned back to the class and looked down at the students. "Because of your tardiness, Gryffindor will lose 5 points." Harry lowered his head, hearing Malfoy's mocking laughter from behind him. Even with students from her own house before her, Professor McGonagall showed no favoritism. That was precisely why every pupil respected her. Transfiguration is the most complex and dangerous branch of magic you will be taught at Hogwarts. Anyone who misbehaves in my class will be asked to leave and never allowed to return. She flicked her wand, and the podium became a pig. Gasps rippled through the room as the students leaned forward, curious. A few bolder ones, like Ron, reached out to touch it. Roger, sitting in the back row, watched the entire casting carefully. The incantation was clear, the wand movement precise, graceful, and swift. The pig looked so real that even a butcher might have been fooled. Remember, transfiguration is not a game, McGonagall warned. It requires absolute concentration. A single misplaced syllable can have serious consequences. She broke the spell down, demonstrating each step. You must master the wand movements. Every knot, every pressure and rhythm must be controlled. She turned the pig back and slowly traced the wand's trajectory through the air. Now, you will transform the matchsticks on your desks into needles, following my instructions. She demonstrated one more time and then let the students practice. It's so hard, Daphne muttered, frowning as she tried again, but her matchstick remained unchanged. Roger beside her, meanwhile, was busy taking notes instead of waving his wand frantically like the others. Your syllable's wrong, Roger observed quietly. The aim is to turn the matchstick into a needle. The spell has two parts, he wrote down in his notebook. One is the transformation, verto, and the other is the target form. He added the Latin, needle is acus. Eh? Daphne blinked. Professor McGonagall didn't explain the etymology. Perhaps when Professor McGonagall attended school, Latin was a basic skill, Roger said, nodding toward Hermione in the row in front of Daphne. The matchstick on Hermione's desk was already taking on a metallic sheen. Hermione raised her chin, pleased. She had placed first in the elementary school Latin competition. Verto acus, Hermione intoned, and a bright transfiguration light shot from her wand. Half of the matchstick transformed into a needle. Wow, Hermione, you're amazing, Daphne said, genuinely impressed. Even a pure blood like her could recognize skill when she saw it. Good, Professor McGonagall praised, walking over. Hermione, try to keep your wand steadier. Next time it will be perfect. Thank you, Professor, Hermione smiled, then noticed Roger writing in his notebook with a quill. Mr. Roger, McGonagall said, having noticed him all along. Transfiguration is not history of magic. Practical application beats long discussion every time. Why don't you try it? She encouraged. She knew the boy had already mastered expecto patronum. Basic transfiguration wouldn't be beyond him. Roger finished the last character, nodded, and stood. Verto acus. His wand moved with a steady, deliberate rhythm. A flash of silvery light struck the matchstick, which changed into a perfect silver needle. A small notification on his panel showed his transfiguration experience increasing by 1. Very good, Roger. McGonagall picked up the needle and examined it closely. Even scrutinized, she could find no fault. If the pronunciation is imprecise or the wand movement wrong, the needle will deform. She showed it to the class. If too much or too little magic is used, the needle will be too hard or too soft. She pressed the needle. It sprang back into shape, proving the magic had been exactly right. You must accurately visualize the needle in your mind, then utter the charm with conviction. Anyone else wish to try? Hermione's hand shot up. Apart from Roger, she was the most confident in the room. Hermione, begin, Professor McGonagall prompted. Hermione closed her eyes, drew a breath, and refused to be outdone. Verto acus! Her wand swept smoothly. A silver glow left its tip. The matchstick became a silver needle. Professor McGonagall nodded in approval. Hermione glanced at Roger as if to ask, "How was that?" "Anyone else?" the professor asked, her gaze sweeping the room and lingering on Harry for a heartbeat. Harry stared at his matchstick, unable to make it change. Being the chosen one felt meaningless in moments like this, and frustration gnawed at him, yet Ron sat loyally at his side. "All right, practice diligently after class," Professor McGonagall said, motioning for Hermione to sit. Then, surprisingly generous, she awarded points. Slytherin gets 10 points, Gryffindor gets 5. The Slytherins cheered. If it weren't for Hermione, Gryffindor would have been 15 points behind after the first lesson. "Professor, why did he get 5 more points than me?" Hermione stood up. She didn't think the difference was that large. McGonagall did not reprimand Hermione. Instead, she placed both needles in Hermione's hand so she could inspect them herself. The simplest way to succeed at basic transfiguration is to ensure the external likeness, McGonagall explained. That is why I had you turn matchsticks into needles, not textbooks. She saw Hermione's frown and continued, the closer the appearance to the intended object, the higher the chance of success. She walked back to the podium and with a swift flick, turned a quill into a small scale, demonstrating the point.